Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Tobirama sealed the Naruto part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Konohagaku no Sato, October 10th. It was a peaceful day in Konohagaku no Sato as the Namikaze family was expecting their family to become bigger and livelier than ever before. Minato was ecstatic as he saw his pregnant wife walking beside him. Both of them had wide smiles on their faces ever since they heard the news last week from Biwako Sarutobi. She had told them that they were going to give birth to not one but 3 children that night. Kushina couldn't be happier as she thought of the lively atmosphere the house would have with such hyper Uzumaki triplets. None were aware of the dangers that were lurking in the dark shadows of the night. "Damn you, Minato, I'll kill you for putting me through this," was a shout that was heard throughout the barriers of the secret hideout by the A&B guarding it. "It'll be all right, Kushi-chan, just push." He was cut off as Kushina screamed again. He tried to hold the seal as stable as possible and pushed more chakra into it. Sweat dripped from his forehead, showing the strain of holding down the strongest and mightiest of the Bijou down. "What the hell do you think I am doing?" she shouted as Minato wiped the sweat off her forehead with a wet cloth and urged her to push harder. Several screams later, the crying of children was heard as Minato gazed at Biwako's arms, the arms that held 3 tiny bundles in her arms. His children, he was a father now. He couldn't even believe it as Biwako put 2 bundles in Kushina's arms and he gazed at them curiously. He could see the mane of the signature scarlet hair of his wife and pouted inwardly. Looks like all his children had taken after their mother, he mused. Biwako saw his expression and smiled. "Minato, don't you worry, not all of them took after Kushina," she said, and his eyes widened as he gazed at the bundle in Biwako's arms and saw the mane of unruly blonde hair and grinned as a happy tear fell of his eye. Biwako smiled at his emotions and looked down as she saw the little bundle of joy open his cerulean blue eyes, and she smiled. "Looks like he takes after you completely, Minato-kun, even the same eyes," she said, and if it was possible his grin widened even more as he took a step forward gazing at his son. Suddenly he heard a gurgle and looked up to see blood leaking out of Biwako's mouth, and his eyes widened. He saw as she fell to her knees and the stranger behind her came into his field of vision, causing his veteran shinobi eyes to harden. He saw the orange mask with a swirl pattern and a single hole for the right eye, but the thing that intrigued him the most was the 3-tomo Sharingan in his visible eye. He saw as he took the bundle that had his son in his arms and pointed a kunai at his throat. "Step away from the Jinchuriki or the child dies," he said coldly, and Minato nodded, holding his hands in a placating manner, trying to buy as much time as possible to think of a solution through this mess. "Calm down, we can talk this out peacefully," he said, and the man chuckled, causing him to narrow his hardened gaze on the stranger that was holding his son. "Oh, I am perfectly calm, but I think you don't love your son as much as I thought," he said, throwing the bundle into the air and held his kunai up to slash him. Minato instantly channeled chakra to the soles of his feet, cracking the ground underneath, and jumped to catch his son. He caught the bundle in midair and held him tightly to his chest like a lifeline. He saw the curious, happy cerulean blue eyes of his son, the expression that showed he didn't know what was going on, nor was he interested, as he heard his happy gurgle and smiled. He was broken out of his thoughts as his feet stuck to the wall, and he gazed back at the bed to see the man standing over his wife, and his eyes narrowed dangerously. "Finally, the Jinchuriki is mine," he said as Minato jumped to catch him but didn't make it in time. He saw as the man disappeared in a swirling vortex with his wife and picked up the 2 red-headed bundles. His eyes widened as he saw the exploding tags on them and threw the blankets away as he flashed to his safe house a mile or so outside the village. The tags exploding harmlessly in the bunker, he skids on the ground and gazed down to the 3 in his arms to see them smiling innocently, and sighed in relief. He started to think back on the events that took place, and his mind began to conclude the possible scenarios. Placing the children down in the bed he had in the hideout, he started concentrating and disappeared in a yellow flash, appearing in his house and put his children on the bed in his bedroom. He walked to the bedside table, picking up a 3-pronged kunai, and closed his eyes, trying to find the marker on Kushina's seal, disappearing in a yellow flash. The man with the orange mask came into existence in a swirling vortex. Kushina came to on a preset holding stand as some chains of kanji made from a holding fuinjutsu held her down. Kushina looked down as she saw her seal on the verge of breaking, then gazed at the man in front of her, panting from the strain of childbirth. She glared at him, though he showed no signs of noticing. She felt her head lighten as she saw his spinning tomos in his eye. The man smirked under his mask as he entered the mindscape to her seal. The 9-tailed fox was chained up to a crater of lava. Suddenly, though, he felt a presence that was foreign to him, and turned his eyes down. He growled as he saw those dreaded eyes he despised so much. "You!" he roared as he felt anger bubble up within him and roared at the man who stood unflinching, making him snarl even more. "It's time you knew who your master is, Ninetails, and serve him," the man said calmly as the 9-tailed fox roared a roar that would have made any lesser man faint. "Make no mistake, Uchiha, you will die and pay for this." He was cut off as he gazed into those spinning tomos of his eye, and his eye copied the pattern. A moment later the Tomo in Nine-Tails' eyes stopped, and his eye had a round pupil instead of the slit one, showing the proof of his possession. Yes, finally the time has come. I've waited so long for this night, he cackled as he exited the mindscape. The masked man came back to his senses completely as red chakra bubbled out from Kushina's seal. It started covering her and a huge glob of demonic chakra came out, a moment later taking the shape of the nine-tailed fox, the king of the bijus and the mightiest of the nine. He bowed down to the masked man who smirked beneath his mask and turned around walking away from the red-headed women laying on the ground. You won't get away with this, whispered Kushina as he stopped dead in his tracks and turned around to meet the gaze of her violet eyes. Amazing, you Uzumaki really are something else, all right. To think, you are alive even after having a tailed beast extracted from you. But no matter, I'll take care of it now, Kyubi, end her. He ordered, turning to the demon, who lifted his paw and aimed his claw at the completely vulnerable Kushina. She closed her eyes awaiting her death, when she felt someone pick her up and a strange pull. She opened her eyes to see the gently smiling face of Minato and smiled weakly in return. You really are as fast as they say, Yellow Flash, the masked man said, as Minato turned around and gave him a cold glare. He hadn't seen such cold eyes in anyone, so those were the eyes of a shinobi who took on 1,000 shinobi on his own, unflinching. Minato turned around as he closed his eyes, sensing the beacon at his safe house, in the bedroom, and disappeared in a yellow flash. The village was going on about peacefully, completely unaware of the events that had just transpired or were about to transpire. Itachi sat in his house with little Sasuke on his lap when a sudden feeling of dread and malevolence fell across the village as Sasuke started crying in his arms. He himself shivered as he tried to calm his little brother down. All of a sudden there was a puff of smoke in the middle of the village, startling everyone. The villagers gazed as the smoke cleared and their heart dropped and blood ran cold. The figure of the nine-tailed fox swirled his massive tails around in all his glory with a massive roar. It's the Nine Tails! Many of them shouted as they started running away from the beast, who started tearing apart through everything that came into its field of vision. An Anbu came to the office in a shunshin as he spoke up hurriedly. Hokage-sama, the Nine-Tails, he was cut off as Hiruzen spoke up, putting on the last pieces of his battle gear. I know, try and hold it off and I'll come, and tried to suppress it as best as I could without Minato, he said, and the Anbu nodded and vanished in another smokeless shunshin as he put his helmet on. Hiruzen, we should keep the Uchiha out of the way for now, said a voice as he turned around to see Danzo, and nodded. Do what you want and handle the security of the village. Evacuate as many as you can safely to the bunkers. I'll go and fend off the beast, he said in an urgent tone of voice as the crippled warhawk nodded and went about to carry out his orders, and Hiruzen jumped out to take charge of the battle in the village. The shinobi forces, including all of the special jonin, elite jonin, and the Anbu were throwing jutsu after jutsu from a range to keep it at bay as the chunin and genin evacuated the battle zones. Fire style, fireball jutsu. Many jonin and Anbu shouted as they launched an inferno of flames at the beast. The Kyubi just looked at it and gave it a massive roar, blowing away the flames. Damn it, nothing works, we have been at it with everything. Where is Yandame-sama? Cursed Ibiki as he looked around and sighed in relief as Hiruzen, clad in his battle gear, came into his field of vision. Sandame-sama, what should we do? And where is Yandame-sama? He asked, and Hiruzen gazed at the destruction and was mortified by it. If this went on any longer, then there won't be a village to protect. He instantly bit his thumb, going through hand seals, and slammed his blood-smeared palm on the ground. Ninja art, summoning jutsu, Monkey King Enma, he said as there was a puff of smoke, and Monkey King Enma stood proudly and gazed at the battlefield, then at the beast, turning to Sarutobi. Sarutobi, why the hell is the Kyubi free? And why is it attacking the village? He asked, and Hiruzen sighed. I don't know, Enma, but let's just stop him and try and subdue him until Minato comes, he said, and Enma nodded as he held the ram hand seal. Transformation, adamantine staff, he said, and transformed into a black staff as Hiruzen twirled it around and got into his bojutsu stance. He flared his chakra as the beast stopped and turned to him with a snarl. Hiruzen launched himself at the beast and slammed his adamantine staff on its head, slamming it back a bit as he growled in defiance. Hiruzen jumped back and was readying his staff for another go when he saw a tail of the beast coming from his blind side and slammed into his abdomen and crashed him into a nearby house. Sandame-sama, the shinobi shouted as they saw him getting taken down when he came out of the rubble and cleaned his mouth of the excess blood with a smirk. Everyone try and push it away. When I engage it, hit it with your wide-range jutsu from its blind side and try and push him outside the village walls, he shouted, and they all nodded as he went through a long chain of hand seals and ended on a strange seal, making Enma's eye widen in shock and a smirk to come across him inwardly. Finally getting serious, are we, Sarutobi? He asked, and Hiruzen nodded as he molded a huge amount of chakra, cracking the ground underneath him. Forbidden secret art, God's strength, he shouted as the muscles on his body buffed up and nerves started showing across them. His muscles and chakra coils were flooded with chakra to the point of their limits. He twirled around his staff and entered his stance, launching himself at the beast at blinding speeds, and slammed his staff in its stomach, pushing it back. The Kyubi slid across the ground, falling down as it roared in defiance. It was near the walls of the village as the surrounding shinobi started going through their own hand seals. Earth style, Earth Dragon Jutsu, / Fire Style, Dragon Flame Bullet. They shouted in unison as a huge torrent of molten earth converged on the Bijou, who brought 5 of his tails in front of him, blocking them, and used the rest to take out the roof where the shinobi were standing and gave a loud roar, startling them. The Kyuubi molded chakra in its mouth as it released a huge torrent of flames powered up by its potent demonic chakra and launched it at the shinobi forces, making their eyes widen as they didn't have time to counter it. Earth Style, Mud Wall. Hiruzen shouted as a huge wall of mud formed in front of them, but to his horror, it tore right through it and followed on its path. Everyone watch out! He shouted, but knew there was nothing they could do to stop it when he heard a shout. Water Style, Water Severing Wave. All of them heard as a huge tidal wave of water came from above them, not touching them in the slightest, and collided with the inferno, creating a huge amount of steam. Wind Style, Great Breakthrough. All of them heard again, and a huge gust of wind blew the steam away as their eyes turned behind to see the stoic face of Tobirama Senju as he walked to them, and they cheered, seeing their savior. It's Naidame-sama! They cheered in unison as Tobirama walked up to Hiruzen. Hiruzen smiled at seeing his sensei. Even though the signs of old age on his face, he still showed how capable he was as a ninja just through his performance now, and the way he held himself. Saru, why is the Kyuubi out and attacking the village? He asked stoically, and Hiruzen frowned. I don't know, sensei. Something must have gone wrong with Kushina's seal, he said, and Tobirama nodded, crossing his arms over his chest as they gazed at the Kyuubi trying to get back up from the last attack. Where the hell is Minato? Why isn't he taking charge of the village? He asked stoically, and Hiruzen shook his head. We don't know where he is, sensei. He hasn't been seen or heard from yet. All I have heard is that the hideout where Kushina was to give birth is destroyed and there weren't their bodies there. So I know they escaped, but what happened to that I am not too sure, he said, and Tobirama nodded as he turned his gaze to the beast, who stood up and roared at them as Tobirama flared his chakra, forming a blue coating around him, showing the density and power his chakra held as the ground cracked beneath him. All the shinobi, including Hiruzen, watched in awe the power he was emanating even at this olden age, and he turned to Hiruzen with those cold veteran eyes. Hiruzen, go on and attack it head on. I'll provide you with support with the help from the other shinobi. I myself am not capable of taking it on single-handedly at my age now, but I will do what I can to help until the yondaime arrives and seals it, he said, and Hiruzen nodded, now more confident in his ability to push the beast back as he charged at the Kyuubi and Tobirama, and the shinobi provided him with the cover. At the Namikaze household, Minato appeared in his bedroom in a yellow flash as he put down Kushina besides the triplets, and walked back to the closet and fetched his cloak as he put it on. Kushina cried as she hugged the triplets and whispered, Minato, what are you going to do? She asked, and Minato sighed. I'll stop the Kyuubi and reseal it into our children by splitting it up. Menna and Mito will be able to hold the chakra of the beast at bay, seeing they have taken completely after you. And Naruto, seeing has taken after me, will seal the soul and consciousness of the beast in him. He'll be able to overcome the influence of the beast without any problems, he said, and Kushina cried harder. Minato, do we have to do this, and how will you seal the beast without using the Reaper Death Seal? She asked, and he smiled at her for reassurance. Tobirama-sama has taught me the combination of the 4-way cross symbol seal that Mito-sama used to seal the Kyuubi in herself. We'll be there with the children to help them through this, don't worry. The village will accept my children as one of their own, of that I have no doubt. Don't worry, he said, and she nodded as he focused on the beacon on top of the Hokage monument, and disappeared in a yellow flash. Minato appeared on top of the Hokage monument in a yellow flash and saw as the Kyuubi stopped in between of his battles and gazed at him. The 3-tomo pattern appeared in its eye for a moment, as its gaze landed on him, and he roared in defiance. It's under his complete control and is out to kill me and destroy the village, he thought as he saw the Kyuubi gather compressed its black demonic chakra as it started to take the form of a ball and launched it at him as well as the people in the shelters in the mountain. Spinning a kunai around his finger, he held it out as Kanji appeared in front of him, and the Bijudama stopped making contact with it, and started getting absorbed into the seal. As soon as it was absorbed completely, Minato flicked the 3-pronged kunai in his hand as the kanji disappeared in a yellow flash, and a blast rocked the village several miles outside of the village. The people cheered seeing their beloved Hokage come, and Minato felt a presence behind him. He slashed the kunai in the head of the orange-masked stranger, the cause of all that had happened in the night, and his eyes widened as the kunai phased right through his head, and the man caught his wrist as he chuckled. It's over, he said as Minato started getting absorbed in a swirling vortex, and the man laughed when suddenly he disappeared in a yellow flash, making him growl. That damn jutsu is getting annoying, he snarled as he teleported to Minato's presence, letting the Kyuubi have his share of destruction until he cut the pillar on which the village stood. In a clearing outside the village, Minato landed skidding on the ground as he came to a halt, and stood up picking up the 3-pronged kunai in his hand and thought about everything that had happened. He broke through the village security, the barrier I set up for protection, dealt with the ANBU and the guards at the hideout with enough stealth that I didn't even sense him approaching me until he made himself known. He has a Sharingan and can control the Kyuubi. The only one who could do that was Madara, but he can't be him. I know that isn't possible. Then who? He thought as the masked man swirled into existence in front of him, and he glared at him coldly. Who are you and why are you doing this? he asked, and the man chuckled a childish laugh, making him narrow his eyes. Oh, who I am is not important, but why I did this. Perhaps it is merely a whim, he said, chuckling as chains dropped from his sleeves and Minato got ready, channeling Chakra to his feet. Both launched themselves at each other. Minato stabbed the man through his face with his kunai, but it phased right through again. As soon as he was out of contact of the man, the chains phased back and tried to cleave him as he disappeared in a yellow flash and appeared a few feet away at a kunai on the ground and picked it up, analyzing everything. He can phase in and out of existence at will. But to attack he will have to come back to being tangible again. In the end, it all comes down to who is faster, and that is something I can have faith in myself at all times. He thought and stood up as he faced the man and held his palm out. He channeled Chakra into his palm as the swirling sound of his signature jutsu filled the clearing, and a blue swirling ball of Chakra was in his hand and the three-pronged kunai in the other, at the ready. Both glared at each other, one with icy cold blue eyes and the other with his lone Sharingan, as a leaf came floating in front of them, the leaf gently touching the ground as both combatants charged in once again. Minato pulled his hand back with the swirling blue Chakra ball humming as he pumped and compressed more Chakra into it and threw the kunai in his hand at the face of the masked man, and it phased right through as both brought their hands at each other to make the first blow. The orange masked man smirked under his mask as he saw that he was going to win, and just as soon as his hand was about to make contact, Minato disappeared in his signature flash, appearing over him, catching the kunai and slammed it into his back. The masked man felt the jutsu grinding him in the back and was slammed into the ground hard as Minato flipped back a few feet away from him. He teleported to the kunai he threw earlier in midair. When did he get so fast to do that? How far has he developed that accursed jutsu that I don't know about it? The man snarled in his thoughts as his right arm melted and fell down, and his eyes widened as Minato again disappeared and came in front of him, jabbing the kunai in his stomach, and put his hand on his chest as kanji covered him. Damn it! He marked me earlier when he attacked me, and this is a contract seal. He put it on me with just a mere touch. He's ruined all of my plans, he thought as he furiously glared at the blankly staring Minato, and clenched his teeth in anger. With this, the Kyuubi no longer belongs to you. Your plans have failed, he said, and the man growled. Make no mistakes, Yondaime. I'll be back and take the Kyuubi with me. You may have defeated me today, but the next time won't be the same. He hissed as he clutched his bleeding stomach and started disappearing in the swirling vortex and out of existence as he escaped his presence, and Minato looked back as he saw a purple barrier outside the village and focused on the nearest beacon to the barrier, and disappeared in a yellow flash. Hiruzen was slamming the Kyuubi as he was dodging its tails left and right and going in for the attacks that the openings Tobirama was providing him. They had pushed the Kyuubi back enough that it was just outside the village walls, and Tobirama saw the chance to contain the beast. Hiruzen, it is time, he shouted, and Hiruzen nodded, instantly forming the signature cross-hand seal for the jutsu as a shadow clone popped beside him, and Tobirama did the same, though without any hand seals, as they jumped into positions taking four corners around the beast and started going through a long chain of hand seals simultaneously, and held the ram seal at the end. Sealing art, 4 purple rays formation. The four shouted in unison as a purple barrier was erected around the beast as the Kyuubi roared and slammed its paw on the barrier, and the ground shook, but the barrier held as it tried and slammed itself in the barrier to break out, and sweat formed on Tobirama's forehead, while the people behind him were cheering, seeing the beast being contained. Damn it, now I feel the age kicking in. I could have held the red barrier by myself for a few minutes a few years back, but now even the purple formation with help from Hiruzen is taking its toll on me. His thoughts were broken as he saw the beast charge up a Bijidama, and his eyes widened as he realized the barrier wouldn't hold against an attack of that magnitude. Hiruzen saw his sensei's heavy breathing and knew the strain it was putting on him, and came to the same conclusion seeing the attack when they heard a shout. Ninja art summoning, food cart destroyer. All of them heard as a red toad with a blue jacket and a tanto on his side appeared over the bijou, and slammed over his head, dissipating the Bijidama as the beast roared in defiance when the tomos in its eyes spun backward and its eyes became slit again. Tobirama saw the change and narrowed his eyes at the bijou. It's about time, Minato, let's seal the beast, shouted Hiruzen, and Minato nodded as he concentrated on molding his chakra and gazed at Tobirama intently. Tobirama-sama, form the seal and teleport us out of here while maintaining the barrier. I'll synchronize with you and share the chakra cost, he said, and Tobirama nodded as he too closed his eyes and held his palms on the barrier, and kanji started covering the barrier while on the inside kanji was covering Gamabunta and the Kyuubi. Hiraishin combination, two-way crossing flash. Both shouted in unison as they disappeared in a flash and appeared outside the village many miles out, and Tobirama panted, breathing heavily, and Hiruzen had his eyes wide as he saw the jutsu his sensei just pulled off. Amazing to think he could still teleport such massive creatures with the barrier holding them even at this age is truly amazing. He thought, amazed at the skill of his teacher, and gazed at Minato, who was breathing a bit heavy. Minato, seal the beast and hurry it up. I won't be able to hold the barrier for too long, he shouted, holding the ram seal, and reinforced the fading barrier as it breathed back to life, and Minato nodded as he disappeared in a yellow flash back to the beacon in his bedroom. He reappeared a moment later, and they saw the 3 bundles in his arms, and Tobirama was confused as to why he needed 3 vessels for the beast. Minato, why have you brought all 3 of your children? I know the beast is massive, but 2 shall suffice, he said, and Minato nodded, his face emotionless as he answered. Indeed you are right, Tobirama-sama, but the man who controlled the Kyuubi tonight will come back to retrieve it. I will split the yin and yang chakra separately, and my twin red-headed children, seeing their strong Uzumaki chakra, which I know you must be able to sense too, he said, and Tobirama nodded. And I'll split the soul of the Kyuubi from the chakra and seal it into Naruto, since I'm sure he would be able to control and subdue the influence of the Bijou the best, he said, and Tobirama was confused as he focused on the blonde child, and his eyes widened as he recognized the faint amounts of familiar chakra signature, and gazed back at Minato, who smiled and nodded. Minato went through hand seals and slammed his palms on the ground as a ritual altar was summoned, and he put his 3 children over them. Tobirama saw the Kyuubi trying to turn his head back to look at what was going on, while Gamabunta tried to hold him down as best as he could, but knew he would be able to turn around. No, he must not realize what is going on. He might attack the children if it realizes it is being sealed again, he thought as he started going through hand seals and ended on Tiger, as he concentrated and molded a huge amount of chakra, taking away most of his remaining reserves. Ninja art, bringer of darkness, he said, and caught the Bijou in his genjutsu as he kept pumping chakra through the jutsu, and the Bijou snarled as he was blinded by the jutsu. Damn it, I don't have the chakra to maintain it for long, and this is the only genjutsu that will work on the mightiest of the Bijou. I'll try and stall it as best as I can, he thought as he went through more hand seals and ended on Bore. Ninja art, demonic illusion, heaven and hell binding, he said as he layered another genjutsu over his previous one, and smirked as the beast was too busy breaking out of the first to realize that it was caught in the second. Perfect, it is only a C-rank genjutsu, but it will do the job with my other technique. He won't even realize that his chakra is being split apart from it until it's too late, he thought with a smirk as he kept pumping chakra into both his genjutsu, though the second was only a minor draining high chunin level technique. Hiruzen saw as Tobirama popped a soldier pill into his mouth, and the way he was breathing heavily, which reminded him that his sensei was not in his prime, and was near the end of his ninja career. Minato, the Bijou is under my genjutsu. Hurry up and seal it before I run out of chakra, he said, and Minato nodded as he started going through a long chain of hand seals and placed his palms on Mito as he split the yin chakra of the Kyuubi, and it started getting absorbed in the seal as the seal glowed and stabilized, turning black as a 4-sided Uzumaki spiral formed on her stomach. He did the same with Menma, and the seal stabilized as he panted heavily, the strain of the day catching up to him even with his Kage-level reserves, and knew Tobirama was doing worse than him as he moved to Naruto for the final part of the seal. The Kyuubi was left with only enough chakra not to dissipate completely to reform, and was now nothing but a large fox with a bit of demonic chakra in him as he went through the same hand seals and placed his hands over Naruto's stomach as Tobirama finally ran out of chakra and fell to his knees panting. The barrier fell along with the genjutsu as the Bijou's eyes widened as he felt his chakra so low that he hadn't felt in centuries, and saw Minato on the final seals about to seal him again, and snarled as he thrashed and threw Gamabunta off him. I will not be sealed again, you pathetic human! He snarled and launched his claw to cleave Naruto to keep him from being sealed. All 3 pairs of eyes widened as the claw raced towards little Naruto. Splack ugh! The voice was heard throughout the clearing as Tobirama and Hiruzen watched in horror as the claw pierced through Minato's stomach, and he held his legs on the altar, stooping at inches from making contact with Naruto, and coughed up blood as he turned his gaze to Tobirama. Tobirama-sama, cough, please complete the sealing, cough cough, he said, hacking out blood as he placed his hands on the claw of the beast, and kanji covered him along with the beast. Forbidden secret art. 2-way paralysis seal, he whispered as both he and the Kyuubi became paralyzed as the forbidden jutsu took effect. The jutsu was forbidden by Mito Uzumaki because it took its strength from a person's life force and held the strength to paralyze anything. Minato knew he wouldn't survive the wound anyways, so he couldn't care less. Tobirama rushed to the ritual altar along with Hiruzen as he went through Hiruzen's storage seal, hurriedly confusing him, and took out another soldier pill, popping it in his mouth as he started going through blazing fast hand seals. Uzumaki sealing style, 4-way cross symbol seal, he shouted as he channeled the pump of chakra granted to him by the pill, and the last of the beast's little chakra and its soul was absorbed into the seal, and he held a half-ram seal as he concentrated on the glowing red seal as the Kyuubi tried to break it, and Tobirama pumped it full of chakra holding a half-ram seal. Fuin! He shouted as the seal glowed and stabilized, turning black and faded into his skin color, and Minato dropped to the ground as Hiruzen caught him and turned to Tobirama, who nodded and held a half-ram seal crouching down in front of him, ready to haration them to the hospital. His eyes opened and his concentration broke as he saw Minato holding his hand and shaking his head with a sad smile. It's too late for me, and you know it, cough cough, he said, coughing up blood as Tobirama smiled in regret, and nodded as a lone tear dropped from his eye when he saw Minato gazing at the ritual altar and at Naruto, and he stood up as he brought the little child to his arms, and Minato took him with a smile. He brushed the faint whisker-like birthmarks his son had with a smile as he thought of the burden he had placed on him. Menma and Mito will have the demonic chakra to fall back to if they ever run into trouble when that man returns. Naruto might not have the power of the beast, but what if the man decides to come after him to take the soul of the Kyuubi to completely tame its power? What will he have to protect himself? Yes, that's it, he'll inherit my legacy, he thought as he pulled out a scroll from behind him with the Namake's seal and put 2 of his fingers on Naruto's stomach and closed his eyes, conjuring up the last of his chakra as he sealed the scroll into his stomach in a blood-sealed storage seal only accessible by Naruto's blood and chakra, and smiled as he saw the cerulean blue eyes of his son watching him curiously, and kissed his cheek and brushed the cheeks of his 2 other children in Hiruzen's arms. Hiruzen smiled as he tried to give him the children in his arms when they fell down, and his eyes widened as he saw Minato's eyes closed and head drop with a smile. Tobirama put 2 fingers on his neck and felt no pulse as another tear rolled down his eye, and he picked up Naruto from his arms and shook his head, telling Hiruzen he was no more, and he too teared up at the loss the village had suffered from his death. The ANBU came and surrounded them as they stood in silence with their heads down in respect to their fallen hero. Konoha Hospital. Tobirama and Hiruzen came in with the red-headed Uzumaki children in his arms, while Tobirama held the last Namake's heir in his arms as his mind went back to the last moments of Minato's life. What have you left him with, Minato? What was that last scroll you sealed into him? What were you thinking? He thought as he gazed at the sleeping blonde bundle and ran his finger on one of his cheeks as the child purred and leaned into his touch, making him smile. Such innocence, this will be what will help you truly keep the demon's influence at bay, little one. He thought, smiling as he rubbed his whiskers and had spaced out as they reached the emergency infirmary, and the nurse asked him to take off his armor, and he nodded. He took off the armor as Tsunade came in, and he smiled a bit. What have you been doing, Aji-san? Your chakra coils are strained to the point of them being almost destroyed. What in God's name did you do? She said in a reprimanding tone, and he sighed. Well, I did take 2 soldier pills back to back and then exhausted my chakra, so I guess that would have been the reason, he said, and she glared at him while healing him a bit. She ran her glowing hands over him, and he felt some of her chakra replenish his own, feeling a bit of life come back to his body, and stood up, flexing his muscles a bit. Tsunade frowned as she saw him doing that. Aji-san, the battle has left some lasting damage to your chakra coils that I'm afraid will not heal even with my medical skills, she said, and he nodded, already figured as much. So how much damage has been done, and what effects will it have? He asked stoically, and she ran over her charts as she looked back to him. You need to let your chakra system heal and rehabilitation for a year. But even then I'm afraid a fight like this one will kill you halfway through it. Your chakra reserves will be accessible to you approximately 1/3 of what you held from what I saw. You will be able to use chakra, but I'm afraid your days as a shinobi are over, she said, and he nodded stoically, not showing any emotions. That is fine, Tsunade. I was able to stop a great threat to the village and protect it. I was afraid I won't be able to use chakra even a little, so this is a blessing to me. This was my last fight anyway. I have realized my days of fighting have long since passed. I saw how old I have gotten, and for the first time in my life, my battle-hardened instincts were hesitant. I didn't even have the necessary chakra to waste on my Raijin no Ken. I know my limits, and I'm afraid that I have reached them, he said, and she nodded with a smile as she kept a hand on his shoulder and gave him a warm smile. You have already done too much for this village, Aji-san. Now let the next generation take over. It's your time to rest and enjoy the peace that you and Hashiramajiji worked so hard to create. You are the one who deserves it the most, after serving the village so much for so long, she said, and he smiled sadly as she watched the wrinkles on his face and the sadness in his eyes as he realized how old he had gotten. She left him to gather his thoughts as suddenly Hiruzen came in, and his stoic mask was back on, and he nodded to his student, who nodded back. What's the matter, Saru? He asked, seeing the troubled expression on his face, and Hiruzen sighed as he rubbed his temples. Sensei, the council has been called, he said tiredly, and Tobirama nodded. Well, that is logical. After the loss of the current Hokage and the travesty the village just faced, there would have been a meeting. So what's the matter for that expression? He asked stoically, and Hiruzen sighed again. Sensei, the council will ask me what became of the Kyuubi after the battle. What will I answer? He was cut off as Tobirama spoke up. What do you mean, what will you answer? You are the Hokage, they answer to you if I'm right, he said icily, and Hiruzen winced at the jab and knew this wasn't going to be good. Well, Sensei, you see, the Shinobi Council won't be a problem in any way. I could make them understand, but the Civilian Council, he was cut off as Tobirama glared at him. Why is the Civilian Council speaking on shinobi matters? There is no need to have them present for matters concerning the shinobi system, he asked coldly, and Hiruzen flinched under his stern gaze and looked down in shame. Well, you see, Sensei, after the Third Great Shinobi War was over, I tried to disband the Civilian Council, but they used their power in times of the war and passed certain bills allowing them a little more power in the say of the village. Minato was trying to rid them of the newfound power, but he wasn't able to do. He was cut off as the temperature of the room dropped, and Tobirama glared at him, making him gulp. Sorry, he said a bit too calmly, making him gulp and nod, motioning for him to go on. The Civilian Council was a law my idiotic brother Hashirama passed for the times of war when the Hokage was too busy with military affairs to handle the civil matters. It was only a temporary law used in wartime. And you are telling me that the Civilian Council went behind your back, passed a bill which needs the signature of a Hokage as well as the fire daimyo, all without you ever noticing until it was said and done. Correct me if I was wrong at any point," he asked icily, reciting the charter of the village laws word for word as Hiruzen held his head down in shame, and said nothing as Tobirama sighed and rubbed his temples. "Who is the head in charge of the civilian council?" he asked, and if possible Hiruzen was ashamed even further as he answered. "The head is Danzo with Hamura and Koharu his equal partners," he said, and shivered from the glare he was getting. "I left the office with you for only one reason, because I knew you walked on the line of rules and emotions correctly. But I guess I was wrong and I have failed my brother," he said in a defeated tone when his eyes hardened and Hiruzen gave him his full attention. "We will inform the village of the status of our Jinchurikis," he said, and cut Hiruzen off as he was about to protest. "The truth will come out sooner or later. Anyone with enough experience and knowledge will know that we must have created a Jinchuriki to stop the Bijou and leak it out, causing mass chaos. Inform them of the difference between a Jinchuriki and its charge, reveal the status of their heritage, and tell them that they are the legacy of their fallen Hokage. The other village needs to know that we have not one but 3 Jinchurikis. Even if one doesn't have the chakra like the other 2, he is still a Jinchuriki through and through. They fall under the complete authority of the militaristic part of the village, and civilians have no say in this matter. Inform them whom they answer to and take back the position of Hokage. I know who the other choice will be, and I will be damned before I let that failure of a student take over the village's leadership. Now go and become the Hokage you are. I taught you better than to bow down to civilians," he said icily as the fire in Hiruzen's eyes returned, and he nodded as he walked out, and Tobirama sighed. "I guess I didn't teach him that well. Many more things must have gone down in his reign for him to react in such a way to a council meeting. Have all my students turned out to be such failures? I never should have let Hashirama make him too soft in matters that needed the attention of a true shinobi's eyes," he thought with a disappointed sigh, and sat back down on his bed and laid down, closing his eyes. The council was buzzing as the advisors from the feudal lords committee were sitting there waiting for the message that was to be taken to him. The shinobi council sat to the right and the civilian council to left, with the elders up front as the seats to the Sarutobi clan head's seat and the Hokage's seat laid vacant. The council doors opened as the room became silent, and Hiruzen stood there in front of them with a stern gaze. The whole council was confused as to why he didn't take his seat as clan head when he spoke up. "As all of you must know, tonight the village has suffered the loss of its young and beloved Yondaime Hokage. The village is in need of a Kage to show the world that it isn't weak and prone to their attacks, and for that, we need a new leader," he said, and saw Danzo smirk as he continued. "I have decided to volunteer to retake the position until a time a new successor worthy enough could be groomed. All in favor please raise your hands," he said stoically as every hand except one was raised from both sides of the council, and he smirked at the seething expression of Danzo behind that stoic mask he was putting on. "Sandaime-sama, what became of the Kyuubi?" asked Inoichi, and he sighed as he took the Hokage's seat and sat down. "Minato along with Tobirama-sama and myself subdued the beast and sealed it," he said as they all smiled at hearing the beast's defeat, and nodded when Shikaku spoke up. "Sandaime-sama, you said sealed, not defeated. What did you seal it into?" he asked, and Hiruzen sighed and nodded, commending the Nara on his sharpness of words inwardly. "Minato split up the Kyuubi into 3 parts," he said as several gasps were heard throughout the council, and he continued. Seeing his 2 children had inherited strong and dense chakra like their mother along with her red hair and violet eyes, Minato sealed the yin and yang halves of the chakra within Mito and Menma, while he split the demon's consciousness away from the chakra and sealed into his second son Naruto. His last wish was for his children to be seen as heroes of the village, he said, and the whole side of the civilian council roared in defiance of the death of the demon child, and even some of the shinobi clan heads were nodding their heads. "Silence!" he roared, leaking a huge amount of killing intent, making them all fall silent as they gulped and looked at their furious Hokage. "That demon child, as you so call it, is Minato's son. He is nothing much more different than any normal child of the village," he said, but was cut off as Hayashi spoke up. "Hokage-sama, how do we know he hasn't been possessed by the demon, and is currently plotting ways to regain its chakra?" asked Hayashi, and he frowned at his tone of disgust but didn't voice it. "Tobirama-sama himself completed the sealing, and has confirmed to me that the sealing is perfect and there is no chance of any kinds of possession. Minato too checked the seal in his dying moments, and the seal is absolutely safe," he said, and the shinobi clan heads nodded hesitantly, seeing he trusted the seal completely so there wasn't any danger involved, while the civilian council was still not convinced as one Mabuki Harino voiced her concerns out loud. "Hokage-sama, we should keep that child away from the Uzumaki twins. What if the seal fails and he tries to kill them to take back the chakra they hold?" she screeched, but was cut off as Hiruzen leaked his killing intent and glared at her. "Councilwoman Harino, are you questioning the abilities of the Nidaime as well as the Yondaime Hokage's skills and words in front of me, the Sandaime Hokage of Konohagakure no Sado?" he asked icily, and she gulped and shook her head, and he nodded, looking at the others for objections, but finding none he continued on with the other affairs of the village's reconstruction and the proper condition of the shinobi forces and the defenses of the village. Tobirama opened his eyes as he saw the nurse come in with 3 small bundles in her arms, and he saw the red-headed manes of 2 of them, while the blonde of the third, and instantly knew who they were as he took them from her arms and gazed at her questionably. "Tobirama-sama, Sarutobi-sama has asked that you be given the children to look out and be handed over to the mother. We don't know who their parents are, but he said you would know what to do, she said, and he nodded and motioned for her to leave as he stood up and put on his shinobi sandals and walked out of the hospital towards the Uzumaki clan compounds. He saw that Hiruzen was smart, not letting the custody of the children in anyone's arms except those that he trusted fully. At least now he was thinking and acting like a Hokage, he mused as he walked and gazed at the destruction the village had suffered. Kushina was sleeping and unconscious from exhaustion as Shizen was there checking up on her. Tsunade was too busy with the surgeries of the hospital that was too complicated for anyone other than her, so she had sent her to take care of Kushina in the meantime. She was currently checking up on her condition and found everything to be normal as she suddenly heard the door being knocked and was instantly on guard as she readied her Senbon launcher, gearing it up in case it was someone trying to create a distraction for an ambush, and opened the door to see the stoic face of Tobirama Senju and the 3 little children in his arms. It would be nice if you would deactivate your Senbon launcher so that you may not accidentally hit the children with it, he said stoically, and she blushed in embarrassment that he had seen her Senbon launcher that she always kept so hidden. She deactivated it, and motioned for him to come in as he nodded and stepped in and went to the room Kushina was sleeping in and put the 3 children near her and sat down on the couch kept to the side with his elbows on his thighs and his fingers in front of his face with that same stoic expression he always held. Shizen saw him sitting and gazing at Kushina intently and fiddled around trying to speak, but seeing his expression, it was a bit difficult. Do you want to say something? Then say it. Do not fret so much, he said stoically, and she blushed in embarrassment yet again as she felt quite intimidated by the man and his stern gaze and nodded. Are you going to sit here until she wakes up? She asked nervously, and he nodded. Yes, he said, and she waited for him to go on, but he sat silently as she realized that he had answered completely. She is going to be asleep for a while, seeing her exhaustion from childbirth and the extraction of the bijou from her, she said, and he nodded yet again. I know, but there is something that I need to tell her. And I should be the one to tell her that. It is important, so I will wait until she wakes up. Doesn't matter how long it takes, he said, answering her completely, knowing she wouldn't leave without hearing it, and she nodded as he spoke up again. The hospital needs your skills more than your time that is being wasted here telling me not to wait. I believe you should put those skills to use, he said stoically, and she blushed in embarrassment yet again for the 3rd time as she didn't really understand if he was insulting, dismissing, or really just telling her. So she did the one thing she could, nodded and left. He sat in silence as Naruto woke up and he saw his cerulean blue eyes gazing at him deeply, and he walked up to him and stood in front of the little boy and picked him up in his arms as both stared at each other. One with narrow stoic eyes while the other with wide curious eyes for a few moments, after which Naruto giggled and Tobirama smiled a bit as he sat down on the couch and rubbed his whiskers, making him giggle. He gazed at the other 2 sleeping children and saw that they didn't have any birthmarks like him, so it couldn't be because of the Kyuubi. Neither Mito nor Kushina inherited the whiskers from the Kyuubi. It's all you, I guess, he thought as he played and tickled the little child in his arms, making him giggle and passed his time. He then gazed into the child's eyes as many thoughts went through his mind. Your chakra signature, even with it being so weak right now, still reminds me so much of him. Why don't you have his eyes then? Will you inherit those accursed eyes one day like Minato believed you would? He thought as he gave his index finger to the child, who caught it in both of his tiny hands and gazed at it curiously, making him smile. I guess the only thing I regret in my life is not having the chance to have a family. To nurture innocence such as yours to become a fine man one day. Ironic, this is why we built and protected this village and I missed out on it, he thought as he watched the cute child, and sadness and regret filled his heart, though it disappeared as he heard the happy tiny giggle of the child as he clutched his finger tightly, making him smile. Kushina opened her eyes groggily as she felt very weak and tired and tried to sit up to no avail when her ears caught the voice of tiny giggles of a child, and her eyes snapped open as she turned her head sideways to the voice and saw Tobirama with little Naruto in his arms playing with him, and she smiled a little as she again tried to sit up, this time successfully, and leaned her back against the headboard of the bed and sighed. Tobirama heard the sigh and stood up as he walked to the bed and put Naruto in her arms as she took him with a small smile and kissed his nose, and he giggled cutely, making her smile, and she looked sideways to see Mito and Menma asleep in their cribs and turned to Tobirama with a questioning glance. Tobirama-sama, where is Minato? Is he in a council meeting or something? She asked, and he shook his head with a small smile, making her stomach form a pit of dread on seeing his expression. Where is he, Tobirama-sama? She asked, and he just looked at her sadly, and her eyes watered as she hugged him tightly, her face in his chest, and started crying, saying he was lying, and he rubbed her hair slightly. I'm sorry, child, Minato is no longer with us, he said somberly, and she cried harder as she realized that her fears were true, and her heart broke on hearing it, and she kept crying for a few minutes while he held her, rubbing her head softly. He knew her since she was a little child and came to Mito's house from Yuzu shortly before it was destroyed, and considered her a granddaughter, and rubbed her head softly with a sad smile. He promised me he wouldn't use that jutsu. He promised me wouldn't use the Reaper Death Seal, she said in sobs, and he rubbed her hair and nodded. And he didn't, Kushina, he said, and she looked up with watering eyes. Then how? Why? she asked with a choked voice, and the vision of his death flashed across his eyes as he closed his eyes and sighed sadly. He was almost done with the sealing when we lost our hold on the Kyuubi, and in a last-ditch attempt to stop himself from being sealed he tried to impale Naruto, he said, and she gasped in sobs as she listened him speak, and he continued. Minato jumped in front of Naruto and took the blow by himself, stopping the claw inches from Naruto. He died to protect his family, a worthy and honorable death. He was a proud man till his last breath, Kushina, he said sadly, and she cried harder as she realized what had happened and what she had lost, and Tobirama let her cry it all out as she fell asleep from the strain of crying and weakness after half an hour, and he put her head to the pillow and picked up Naruto from her arms as he yawned cutely, and he put him in his crib and tucked him in as he fell asleep, walking into the kitchen looking through the fridge for something to eat as he picked up a sandwich and a juice and sat down on the couch in Kushina's room keeping guard. He knew the village didn't have the resources to spare for their protection and they couldn't be left all alone, so he decided to keep watch over the house until Kushina was up and about again. And he wouldn't admit it to himself, but he had grown a bit attached to the little blonde bundle that was sleeping soundly in his crib. Hiruzen sighed as he worked on the piles of paperwork that were building up on his desk when the window to his office slid open, and he smiled as he felt the familiar presence come in. So it really is true, Sarutobi-sensei, the kid is gone, huh? Asked Jiraiya sadly as Hiruzen turned around and nodded with a sad smile. I'm glad you are here, Jiraiya. The village needs the strength of its Sennin now, he said, and Jiraiya nodded. So what happened other than Minato's passing? He asked, and Hiruzen sighed. Well, he split the yin and yang parts of the Bijuu's chakra and sealed them into Menma and Mito, while he sealed the soul into Naruto, he said, and Jiraiya nodded, whistling. So he created 2 Jinchurikis from 1 Bijuu, he said, and Hiruzen was confused at his answer. Jiraiya, what about Naruto? He asked, and Jiraiya shook his head. No, he is a powerless Jinchuriki. He doesn't even have any demonic chakra in him. He is a Jinchuriki just in name, he said, and Hiruzen nodded, agreeing with his logic. We will have to train the twins when they grow up to let them learn how to harness the massive power they hold. They will become the protectors of the leaf and the heroes who will turn the image of Konoha and its stability back, he said, and Hiruzen nodded, knowing he was right. Yes, but that will all come in due time. But for now, Jiraiya, we need your spy network more than ever. You must go out in the field and keep me updated on any potential threats to the village so that I can prepare and deal with them if necessary. I have authorized Danzo and his route back to service that I disbanded after the previous war. We need all the strength we could conjure up. The death of Minato will make us look weak in front of the other villages. Iwa and Kumo especially might take this chance to attack and kidnap or assassinate Minato's children, especially after they learn that 2 of them harnessed the Kyuubi's chakra without its influence, he said, and Jiraiya nodded. All right, sensei, I'll leave tomorrow, but first I'll meet up with Kushina and the twins, he said, and Hiruzen nodded as he jumped out of the window. A moment later, Hiruzen realized that he only said twins but shrugged it off and went back to his paperwork. Tobirama was sitting on the couch as he went through some scrolls that were kept on the shelves and was reading up on some old Uzumaki seals as he heard a knock and wondered who could be there to meet them. He walked to the door and saw Hiruzen's student standing there. Jiraiya was surprised at seeing Tobirama Senju standing there and nodded politely at the man. He always respected him, though he knew the feeling wasn't mutual. Tobirama-sama, he said politely, and Tobirama nodded. He never really liked the man. He was unbecoming of a shinobi and was a disgrace to men around the world with his perverted habits, and how many times he had seen him drunk. In his eyes, strength wasn't what made the man, it was his character. And he knew well that the pervert wasn't one to take on a responsibility seriously, and he never really thought about him in a nice way. Hiruzen's perverted hermit student, he said stoically with a nod, and Jiraiya's face faltered at the introduction and stood up straight, coughing away the embarrassment and shame he felt at the way he was called. It's Jiraiya, Tobirama-sama, he said, and Tobirama nodded and moved back, letting him come back himself without inviting him in. I couldn't care less, he said stoically, and Jiraiya sighed. He knew the kind of man Tobirama was, and he was never really one that was rated high in his books, and walked in, locking the door behind him. He walked in and was curious as to what he was doing here and voiced it. I'm Tobirama-sama, if you don't mind me asking, what are you doing here? He asked politely as they walked to the living room, and Tobirama motioned for him to sit on the dining table as he kept a glass of water that he took gratefully, and sat in front of the man with his stoic look. Kushina is too tired and weak after childbirth and extraction. The children needed to be looked after and offered protection if anyone from the inside or the outside decides to attack them for any reason, while the village doesn't have necessary forces to spare for their protection. So I am here to look after them until Kushina is up and about, he said stoically, and Jiraiya nodded, seeing his logic, though wondered if he wasn't tired himself from the strain of the battle. You must be tired too, Tobirama-sama. Shouldn't you be resting as well? He asked, and Tobirama stared at him blankly, and Jiraiya honestly felt really stupid seeing his look but didn't understand what he asked wrong. Their protection is necessary. What if I fall asleep and in my moment of weakness someone breaks in? I am a trained shinobi even if my age is now well past it. We are trained to endure rough conditions that we might face one day. I have been healed and have had proper food and a few hours of sleep at the hospital. That is enough for me to stay fully alert for around 18 hours with full focus. I take my responsibility seriously," he said stoically, and Jiraiya nodded at the man with a respected gaze. This was why he looked up to the man. He was a true shinobi in every sense of the word. Even in his age, he mused as he saw the fully alert eyes and posture the man held, even if he was there with him in case of an attack. Suddenly they heard footsteps as Kushina came walking into the room with a tired expression and smiled tiredly at seeing Jiraiya there. "Jiraiya-sensei, it's good to see you here," she said weakly, and Tobirama stood up, helping her to the armchair and sat down in front of her as Jiraiya sat on the couch with a small smile. "So how are the children, Kushina?" he asked, and she smiled and nodded. "They are good, Jiraiya-sensei. They are asleep right now, though you can go and see them if you want. Just try and be a little quiet," she said, and he nodded as Tobirama walked ahead of him, showing him the room where the children were, and Jiraiya gazed at the 3 sleeping bundles and smiled as he saw the red-headed children who had completely taken after their mother. Then his gaze turned at Naruto, who was sleeping soundly, and saw Tobirama's fond smile as he gazed at the little blonde bundle and smiled. It looks like Tobirama-sama has a soft spot for the little blonde gaki there. If not for those 3 whiskers, he is a carbon copy of Minato. It's such a shame that he doesn't have the Kyuubi's power in him. I would have loved to pass on my teachings to another blonde, but it looks like this time it will be 2 redheads," he thought, turning his eyes back to the twins, and stayed there for a few moments, as he saw Tobirama rubbing Naruto's whiskered, who purred in his sleep and giggled and leaned into his touch, making him smile fondly. Both left the room and walked back to the living room as Jiraiya and Tobirama took their previous seats with smiles. "The twins take completely after you, Kushina. Their hair, face, everything. Naruto, if not for the whiskers, is a replica of Minato, and will be a lady killer in the future," he said, and Kushina smiled and nodded, and Tobirama too smiled fondly, thinking of the cute children. Being near Naruto made him feel like a grandfather himself now that he thought about it. "Yes, Minato and I decided that Mito and Menma will take up the Uzumaki clan names and Naruto the Namikaze so that both clan names could live on," she said with a smile, and both men nodded with smiles. "The twins will be needed to be trained so that they could harness the chakra they hold properly in the future, Kushina. You know how hard it is to control it if you went out of control," he said, and she nodded. "I'll train them all well, Jiraiya, don't worry," she said, and he nodded with a smile. "Give a bit more attention to Mito and Menma, Kushina. They will need all the love and attention to make sure their emotions remain happy and away from the negative urges," he said, and she nodded, knowing the dangers, being a Jinchuriki herself, though Tobirama frowned at his words but said nothing, knowing it wasn't his place. "I'll raise them all nicely, Jiraiya, don't worry." "So how long are you here?" she asked, and he smiled sadly. "I am leaving tomorrow, Kushina. Sarutobi-sensei asked me to be in the field and keep up my spy network to look out for potential threats in the village. I will be back when the twins turn 5 and will help you start their training and help them learn to control the power Minato has left them. By then things should cool down enough for me to return," he said, and she nodded sadly, knowing the village needed his skills more at the moment, and stood up as they walked Jiraiya to the door, and she smiled as she waved him off. "Tobirama-sama, how long are you going to stay?" she asked in a tired and hopeful voice, and he smiled a little at seeing her vulnerable and sad and put a hand on her head like a child. "I am here until you are up and about enough to take care of yourself and the children. Don't worry, I don't really have anything else to do. Plus, I and Naruto have a lot of fun in the meantime," he said, and she smiled and hugged him happily. Happy that she didn't have to be alone at a time like this, and he hugged his granddaughter and all but blood back, rubbing her back softly. Time skip 5 years. Kanahigaku no Sato, Uzumaki clan compounds. The past 5 years had been pretty peaceful for the villagers of the village hidden in the leaves. The people were enjoying the times of peace, and it was a surprising fact that none of the other villages had thought of taking advantage of the weakness of the village after the Kyuubi attack. But it could be surmised as normal since most of the other villages were still recovering from the previous war, while Kiri itself had landed itself in a civil war. The Uzumaki Namikaze family too had been living quite nicely and peacefully. Kushina had been a great mother over the past 5 years, showering her children with love and care, making their childhood a peaceful and fun few years of their lives. "Naruto, get back here," shouted Kushina as she chased her little blonde of joy through the hallways as he ran through the house with a bottle of soy sauce. Kushina had on her usual clothes with an apron on top and the Uzumaki spiral emblazoned in front of it, and was running with a spatula in her hand. "Naruto, I need that for the food. Come back here," she said as she chased him playfully with a smile on her face, and Naruto laughed as he ran through the house hot on his toes. "You'll never catch the fastest boy in the leaf, Kaa-chan," he shouted, chuckling as suddenly he saw Mito come down the stairs and in front of him as he stopped abruptly, tripping on his feet and landed on his chest face first, and the sound of the glass breaking was heard throughout the house. Kushina gasped as she saw a bit of blood on his hand and rushed to him. "Naruto, are you all right?" she asked hurriedly as she picked him up and sat him on her lap. She saw the little pieces in his chest and some on his hands and arms and was wide-eyed at the wounds he had suffered. But to her surprise he wasn't crying, just wincing in pain as she took out the pieces slowly one by one, and her motherly instincts kicked in. "How many times have I told you not to trouble me so much? Now see what you've done. What if you had gotten hurt at some vital spot? Then what would have happened?" She started scolding him half-heartedly and Mito looked down with a sad expression. "Sorry, Naruto. I didn't know you were running or I would have been careful and not made you trip," she said sadly, knowing how fast and nimble her Aniki was, and he never tripped if he ran. Naruto grinned foxily and laughed. "It's nothing, Mito. These small pieces of glass from a bottle of soy sauce aren't enough to keep the great Naruto Namikaze down to Bayo," he said proudly, and Mito smiled brightly, and Kushina stifled a giggle at his boisterous exclamation and that verbal tick that he had gained from her, and took out a piece from his arm quickly as he yelped and glared at her while she smiled bemusedly. "What, I thought a little piece of glass wasn't enough to keep the great Naruto Namikaze down to Bayo," she teased, and he puffed his cheeks and glared at her, making her giggle. "I'll have you know it would take at least half the village to take me out. Hey, watch it," he yelped as Kushina took out another piece from his chest, abruptly making him yelp and her giggle. Mito giggled at the antics of her brother, and the way her mother always let his pranks slide with just a half-hearted scolding and a smile. Menma came down from his room hearing the commotion and knew that his brother was again up to something. Kushina picked the boy up and took him to the living room. She took out the first aid kit and started mending her little blonde bundle, and it always surprised her that he had never once cried even after taking so many injuries from everyone. She finished bandaging his hand and his chest as she put his new t-shirt on him over his head forcefully as he yelped, and she giggled at him, ruffling his hair. "Now that you have broken the soy sauce, go and grab a new bottle from the convenience store," she said, ruffling his hair, and he whined at her. "Oh, come on. I'm so hurt, look at these bandages. I'm sure Mito or Menma won't mind helping their heavily wounded brother," he said with wide pleading eyes, adding a dramatic effect as Kushina glared at him, while her lips twitched upwards and she bonked him on the head. He could be hyperactive one moment and totally and utterly lazy the next. He really was an enigma, she mused as she put the money in his hands and towered over him with her hands on her hips, and he shrunk under her gaze. "Oh no, you don't get out of this one with that dramatic effect you always make at me to get out, mister. Now get going or no dinner for you," she scolded half-heartedly, and he nodded and went out grumbling about stupid dangerous mothers that were too troublesome for their own good while she shook her head with a sigh. In the Nara compounds, 2 Naras sneezed as they thought someone was getting troubled by a troublesome woman and muttered troublesome. He put on his sandals and walked out of the house, putting his hands in his pockets, and walked through the streets, as he saw the cold looks and glares that were always sent his way, and kicked a rock. This was why he always refused to come out. He hated the looks people gave him. He just didn't understand the reason for it. The villager loved his sisters and praised them like heroes, while the opposite was for him as soon as he was alone, and without his mother or siblings. He didn't want them to kiss the ground he walked on like his siblings, but a little normal reaction like he was just another kid wouldn't be too bad, he mused as he walked in the store and picked up a bottle and went up to the counter as the woman on the counter glared at him, but he ignored it. "What do you want?" she spat venomously, and he ignored her expression and kept the bottle and the money on the table as she rang it and handed him the change. "Now get out," she said in disgust, and he walked out with a lazy expression with the bag in his hand and both his hands in his pockets with the same lazy expression on his face, and walked to his home ignoring all the glares and looks along with the whispers completely, and came up to his house and went in with a small smile. He came to the kitchen and saw Menma and Mito on the dining table and Kushina cooking as he walked up to her and put the bottle on the counter with a heavy tired sigh, making his mother sigh with him. "I swear I don't understand where you got that lazy attitude from," she said, shaking her head, and took the bottle as she put her hand forward for the rest of the money, and he looked at her lazily. Both stood like that for a few moments as Mito and Menma watched on in amusement, while Kushina's eye twitched. "Give me the rest of the money," she said, holding her temper back at his lazy face, and he stared at her blankly. "No," he said simply, and her eye twitched dangerously. "Why?" she asked, gritting her teeth, and he cleared his ear with his pinky finger lazily, making her furious. "I don't go so far without payments of some sort." "Thanks for your generous tip," he said, and her hair flailed around dangerously, and Mito and Menma gulped, seeing the fury her mother was so famous for, and were worried for the safety of their brother, as she bent down with furious eyes while Naruto just gazed at her lazily, not worried in the least. Their faces were inches apart, one furious, and one the same lazy one, and Naruto yawned a bit, making her temper go loose when he suddenly kissed her nose softly, and her anger died down as she saw his small smile. "Arigato, Ka-chan. Call me when the food is done, okay? I'll lie down at my spot for a while," he said, walking out into the garden to sleep under his usual shade of the tree branch, and waved his hand lazily as she sighed and shook her head as exasperation, while Mito and Menma giggled. "What am I going to do with that boy?" she asked herself, face palming, and smiled fondly as she looked at him lie down with his arms crossed behind his head and eyes closed with a squirrel on his chest. She never could stay angry at him for more than a few minutes, and even then he would do something like that to make her calm down again. She went back to her cooking and hummed as she worked while Menma and Mito chatted away. She thought of the birthday of her children that was tomorrow and smiled happily as she served the food on the table. "Naruto, come back here, the food is ready," she shouted as he jumped down and walked in with a yawn as he took his seat, and they all ate in silence. Then Kushina thought of the preparations she had to make for the surprise party she had planned for tomorrow and smiled as they finished their food, and she took the dishes to the kitchen. "All right, now you three go off and play outside. I have to do some things here and you three will be in the way." she said, and Mito and Menma were confused but nodded while Naruto smiled mischievously. Like planning the party for tomorrow? He asked innocently, and her eyes widened as she glared at the innocently whistling blonde, but her lips twitched upwards as she asked, "And how did you know that?" she asked, and he looked at her blankly as if she was stupid. "You have your room filled with storage scrolls from the decoration shop, and tomorrow is our birthday. It isn't really that hard to figure that out, you know," he said, and she narrowed her eyes at the blonde. "And how did you find those scrolls, Naruto?" she asked dangerously as she glared at him. She had hidden those scrolls pretty well, and a 5-year-old finding it so easily really was insulting to her. "I have my ways," he said, waving his hand lazily, and walked away to the door. "All right, let's go and let her plan the surprise party," he said, and Menma and Mito walked with him, giggling while Kushina sighed, face palming. "That boy will be the death of me, I swear," she said tiredly, and walked into her room towards the storage scroll she had kept in her room in a box, and opened it to see a folded note, and picked it up with a raised eyebrow. She opened it, and saw it was Naruto's handwriting. "Next time hide it somewhere that isn't so obvious. Please make it a little harder or it isn't any fun." She read the note with a chibi Naruto giving her a victory sign at the end of the note, and giggled as she kept it with her as a memento, and opened the box giggling at her son's antics. She wasn't really worried since Hiruzen had assigned an ANBU for the lookout for her children at all times, and she could sense Kakashi following her children and moving out of her range as she got to work. Konoha Central Park. Naruto, Mito, and Menma came to the park as they saw several children playing there, and they smiled as they walked up. Several parents were startled as they saw the Uzumaki twins, the heroes of the village, come with the demon scum. They crouched down to their children and whispered to go and play with them but to keep away from the blonde boy. When asked why, they said he wasn't good to be around and may hurt them. The children all nodded and listened to their parents as they ran up to the triplets and started talking to the red-headed twins while Naruto was pushed away. Naruto saw that there was no one really around who was looking at him, and the parents were all giving him the same looks as always. He turned his gaze back at the crowd as Menma was pulled away to play by several children while Mito was resisting glancing at him with a worried glance, and he smiled at her for reassurance. "You go on, Mito. I'll be over there just lazing around. I am no mood to play anyways," he said with a fake smile, and she nodded hesitantly, seeing his smile, and ran away with the children, while the parents smirked as their children got the heroes away from the demon and got to be friends with them too. Naruto just went to a secluded area and sat on a wooden swing tied to a tree and swung around as he saw his siblings play and smiled sadly. He knew no one really wanted to be his friend for who he was. Most just wanted to get to know him just so they could get closer to his siblings as a means to use him, and he didn't want people like that around him. He was happy that at least his siblings had so many friends to play with, and smiled as he watched them play while his eyes held a little pain but fondness at seeing them so happy. He sat there swinging alone as he kept gazing at his siblings with a sad smile out of everyone's eyesight. Tobirama was walking through the streets as he saw the children playing in the park and smiled at seeing them so happy. This was why the village was created, to give the children a peaceful childhood outside the realms of violence. He now saw how little he had to do when he wasn't looking over clan affairs or doing some sort of research into the shinobi arts. He walked up to a bench and sat down as many people passing by nodded at him with respect while he nodded back and gazed at the happy faces of the children playing with a small smile. His gaze then turned to a far-off tree where a lone child sat on a swing and was swinging and gazing at the children playing sadly, and his eyes narrowed. Those sun-kissed blonde hair, cerulean blue eyes, and especially those 3 whiskers were a dead giveaway. He looked around and saw some of the looks the parents were giving him, and how they were standing away from the place he sat alone, and clenched his jaw. He understood why those people were looking at him that way, but why was Naruto not playing with the children? He didn't like unanswered questions, and this irked him quite a bit. He stood up and walked to the part of the park where he sat alone, and saw his eyes that held a painful expression yet a fond smile, and he followed his gaze to see the 2 redheads playing happily and smiled sadly. He is lonely and in pain, yet still he smiles seeing his siblings happy. He really is an interesting one, he thought as he trudged from behind him and stood by him silently. "Why aren't you playing with the other children?" he asked, suddenly breaking the silence, and was surprised to see that the child was not startled yet seemed to be perfectly calm, like he knew he was coming. He kept it in the back of his mind, as Naruto put his mask over his face back on and grinned at the man. "It's nothing, I just like being alone and all. Plus, I'd rather sit around than waste my energy and get tired playing," he said with a fake smile, and Tobirama narrowed his eyes at the child. One so young and already masking his emotions so perfectly. This isn't the first time it has happened since he masked his emotions so quickly, he thought, and nodded at the boy, not wanting to call off his lie and make him feel bad as he sat down beside him on the ground, and Naruto looked at him surprised. This was the first adult besides Hiruzen or Jiraiya that had been interested in talking to him, even if those 2 came to meet the twins, but they still spent some time with him. He had thought that the man would leave once he had answered his question, but he instead looked like wanted to be with him, and it warmed his heart that someone really wanted to be by him, even if it was just sitting beside him, as he smiled genuinely and swung sideways, both feeling the breeze and the silence to be pretty comfortable. Suddenly Tobirama unsealed a shogi board and put it in front of him as he motioned for Naruto to sit in front of him. Naruto rose an eyebrow and sat in front of him and looked at him curiously as Tobirama started placing the pieces on the board. Since you seem to be the one not to waste energy and laze around, let's put your mind to the test. Have you ever played shogi? He asked, and Naruto shook his head innocently, and he smirked and nodded. Let's see if you are anything like your old man, he thought as he kept the last piece and turned to him with a stoic face. Shogi is a great strategy game and a good way to pass the time. It is also called the general's game. The players use similar strategies like shinobi do on the battlefield. Deception is a great part of the game, with the insight to moves many moves ahead and putting yourself in your opponent's shoes and know what he will do before he even knows it himself, he said, and Naruto looked amazed at the board, then at the man, and nodded. Why, you're really smart, old man, he said, and Tobirama nodded, ignoring the comment about his age since he really was old now, and decided to move on. Now I'll explain the pieces to you, so listen carefully. Ask only after I am done, do not interrupt in between, he said, and Naruto nodded, giving him his full attention as the man started explaining the pieces. He had to admit the game looked really intriguing and he would have to use his mind a lot. But he liked the rush the game looked to be, and if the man was as smart as he looked to be, then it would be fun. Tobirama explained the last piece and saw Naruto's focused eyes running around the blocks of the board wildly and smirked. Looks like the game caught his eye, he thought as he looked at the 5-year-old blonde and kept a small two-way clock beside him, and Naruto looked at him questionably. We shall time the amount of time each takes to make a move and how long the game lasts, showing how much you will have improved. Now let's see if you've really understood the game or not, he said, and Naruto nodded as Tobirama moved his piece and tapped the button of the clock, and Naruto did the same. This went on for about 7 minutes as Tobirama captured his king and pressed the button of the clock. And that is check and mate, he said, and expected the boy to pull his hair or shout something and say that it was too boring. But to his utter surprise, he saw his focused eyes on the board as he calculated the strategy Tobirama used. Again, said Naruto, and Tobirama raised an eyebrow and nodded as he rearranged the pieces and made his move, tapping the clock with his own. Tobirama used the same strategy as before, but was surprised as he saw the kid countering it with a new one and smirked. The kid is learning. He read my moves and devised a counter strategy through analyzing the previous game. He really is Minato's son, all right, he thought, and played the game by changing his strategy completely, and Naruto frowned, then decided to improvise on the fly as he started thinking through various future moves that he could make when he remembered his words about thinking ahead and using deceptions as he started his own moves, and Tobirama smirked at seeing him improvise. After 12 minutes, Tobirama hit the clock as he captured his king again. And that is check and mate, Naruto, he said, and Naruto nodded, though kept focused on the board as he spoke up. How do you know my name, old man? I never introduced myself, he said, and Tobirama nodded at his sharp instincts. I have known you ever since you were born. Your father was a friend of mine, you could say, and your mother has known me since she was a little child. You don't remember me, but I remember you vividly, he said, and Naruto nodded. Well, I guess we have to introduce ourselves again though. I'm Naruto, Naruto Namikaze. It's a pleasure to meet you, he said, holding his hand out with a smile, and Tobirama smiled and nodded. I'm Tobirama, Tobirama Senju. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, he said stoically, and Naruto tilted his head to the side and looked at him curiously. Do you always stay like that, stuck up and stuff? He asked innocently, and Tobirama's eye twitched, and he answered calmly. Yes, that's the way I am. That isn't a problem, is it? He asked calmly, and Naruto smiled and waved his hand lazily. Nah, it suits you. It makes me want to respect you and take you seriously. Not like those stupid people who I can't take a word seriously, like that pervert godfather I have, he said lazily, and Tobirama chuckled at his answer and nodded. The kid was interesting, all right. To make him laugh was a feat in itself, he mused. And he agreed on Jiraiya's nature completely with him. All right, I guess you would be tired of playing this game. He was cut off as Naruto gave him a stern, determined glare. Again, he said, making Tobirama's eyebrows to shoot upwards in surprise. He guessed that the boy would be tired or bored of sitting so long after seeing his lazy personality, but he wanted to go again. I'm going to beat you if that's the last thing that I do, he said, and Tobirama smirked. So the kid didn't like to lose or give up, he mused and nodded, resetting the pieces as they played till sunset, too lost in the game when Naruto heard his siblings shout his name, and he looked at Tobirama with a sad smile. It seems I have to go, old man, he said, and Tobirama nodded with a smile, surprised that they had been so engrossed in playing that he lost track of time. Will you meet me again? He asked nervously and a bit shyly, and Tobirama smiled at the boy. I don't really have much to do nowadays and am free all day. Drop by the Senju clan compounds and ask for my house. Everyone will tell you and guide you to my house. I live alone, so drop by any time, he said, and Naruto nodded as he started to leave, then suddenly stopped and turned around, making Tobirama raise an eyebrow. There is a party at my house tomorrow evening. It would be nice if you could come and drop by. You are a friend of mine now, after all, he said, and Tobirama sat there stunned. People never really asked him to come to social events due to his personality, and he didn't like wasting time on them himself. But what shocked him more, that the child called him his friend. That was a word he hadn't been associated with in far too long. He smiled and nodded as he didn't have the heart to refuse him even if he wanted to. I'll be there, he said stoically, and Naruto grinned foxily and nodded as he ran away, waving his hand at him. See you tomorrow then, old man, he said, and Tobirama smiled as he watched him go, and a fond smile lit up his face. He was looking forward to a social event for the first time in his life, he mused as he walked back to the Senju compounds with a smile. Menma and Mito glanced at Naruto to see his usual lazy expression and his hands in his pockets as he walked with them. So what did you do today, Naruto? Asked Mito, and Menma too looked at him curiously as Naruto shrugged lazily and sighed. Nothing much, just lazed around, you know, he said lazily, not wanting to explain to them that he was playing with the old man all the time, and then have to explain it all to them. It was too much work, he thought, and kept walking, and they sweat dropped at his nonchalant reply and sighed, shaking their heads with a smile. He really was one of a kind, both mused as they headed home. Kakashi meanwhile had seen everything in the shadows and smiled beneath his ANBU mask as he watched Naruto walk to his home. So Tobirama-sama really is interested in him. It would certainly be amusing to watch such opposite personalities interacting with each other, he thought, and watched them enter their clan compounds and smiled. Uzumaki Namake's households. Kushina had finally finished the preparations and had sent out the invitations to many of the clan heads and friends they had. She heard the door open and saw the three children walk in, and saw as Mito and Menma had dirty clothes and faces, but she saw Naruto was completely clean and sighed. He must have been sleeping again. That boy sometimes reminded her of the Naras. Alright you guys, please don't go in the clan compound's living room. I've made the arrangements there, so please stay out until tomorrow. It was supposed to be a complete surprise until someone, she glared at Naruto, who whistled innocently, making her sigh. Decided to ruin it, so at least let the preparations be a surprise, alright? She asked, and they nodded as they eagerly waited for the next day. Mito and Menma to meet their friends and enjoy, while Naruto wanted to see the old man and wanted to see if maybe someone might want to be his friend. Senju clan compounds. Tobirama walked through the compounds and remembered that he had to buy a gift if he wanted to go there tomorrow. It was an obligation for the guests to give children gifts, he thought, and walked back to the house where Tsunade lived and knocked on the door. Tsunade wondered who it was and was surprised to see her granduncle there. Aji-san, this is a surprise, please come in, she started as he raised his hand, and she knew he must want something then, and looked at him curiously. There was never really a time that he had to ask her something. It was always the other way around, so she was interested to hear what he had to say. Tsunade, what do people give children on their birthdays? He asked stoically, and she stared at him blankly while a crow croaked in the background. Excuse me? She asked in disbelief. Of all the questions, she didn't expect this. I don't think my question was too tough for you to understand, and I worded it quite simply. Well, I'll say it again. What do people give children on their birthdays? He asked, and this time she was sure he had asked what she had heard the first time, and nodded hesitantly. How old is the child? She asked curiously, and he nodded, seeing the logic in her question. 5. He said stoically, and she nodded. Does he belong to a clan? She asked, and he nodded again. Well, usually children that age get toys, clothes and stuff, she said as she saw the blank look on his face that made her feel quite stupid. She sighed and continued as she thought that really wasn't his style. But since he belongs to a clan, that is the age where they usually take their first steps in shinobi training. So a kunai or shuriken set, or maybe a scroll on beginner's chakra theory and chakra control or something like that, she said, and he nodded with a smile. That was indeed a worthwhile gift in his eyes. He had made the right decision in asking for her suggestion, and knew exactly what would be the perfect gift for him, and nodded to himself with a fond smile as he thought of the little blonde. Tsunade saw his smile and smiled herself. It seemed he had a soft spot for the child, and for him to go to a party was certainly a surprise, and there was only one family that had children that young that were born tomorrow, she thought. So who is it for Aji-san? She asked, and he looked at her with a nod. Naruto Namake's. He invited me to a gathering at his house for his birthday tomorrow, and I remember that it is a social obligation to bring a gift for the child, he said, and she nodded with a smile. She herself had been invited by Kushina and was ecstatic to meet the energetic twin redheads. Tobirama took his leave and walked to the shopping district of the village, and came up to the White Dragon weapons shop. It was the largest shop in the village, and this was where he used to buy his own equipment. As he walked in, Hideki Higurashi was going through his inventory when the bell to the door rang, and he was wide-eyed to see Tobirama Senju coming in. It was rare for him to come ever since he completely retired after his last battle 5 years ago, and he smiled at seeing the former Hokage walk up to him. Tobirama-sama, it is certainly a surprise to see you here. What can I do for you today? He said politely, and Tobirama nodded. There is a custom order I would like to place, and I would need it to be done by tomorrow afternoon. It is urgent, and I need it by then, he said, and Hideki nodded. I can get it done for you if the order is not something that requires some really rare materials that I would have to order from outside the village. What is the order, Tobirama-sama? He asked, and Tobirama nodded, asking for a brush and ink, as he started drawing the specifications and designs of his order, and handed it back to him. Hideki took the scroll from him, and his eyes widened as he read the specifications of the order, and turned to him with a shocked face, then smiled. It shall be done, Tobirama-sama, but it will cost you quite a bit, seeing the rare material, and the speed with which you want it made. All said and done, it will cost you around 19,000 ryo. he said, and Tobirama nodded as he took out his wallet and handed him a couple thousand ryo. Money isn't an issue, but I want them done on time, he said, and Hideki nodded, knowing he was a strict and punctual man. Don't worry, Tobirama-sama, it shall be done by tomorrow noon, he said, and Tobirama smiled and nodded. He really looked forward to seeing how he liked his present tomorrow. Senju clan compounds. Tobirama woke up as usual pretty early in the morning, as was his routine for so many years. He freshened up and had his breakfast as he put on a simple white t-shirt with a small Senju clan symbol on the back of the t-shirt, and simple blue pants with the usual shinobi sandals, and strapped the Raijin no Ken to the back of his hip, hidden under his t-shirt as was his habit for so many years. He may not use it anymore, but having it to himself gave him a feeling of self-assurance nonetheless. He walked out into the streets, and towards the shopping district of the village, towards the White Dragon weapons shop, and walked in. Hideki looked up and smiled as he saw the man he was expecting to see. He knew Tobirama was a man who always liked to come either exactly on time or a little early, and in this case it was a little early as he had expected. Welcome, Tobirama-sama, you are just in time. I just got your order completed. Here, he said, and handed him a wooden box with a premium expensive feel to it, and Tobirama nodded and took the box as he saw the things he ordered and checked its balance and craftsmanship of each of the items. Hideki looked at him, inspecting each item carefully, and when he kept the last of them and sealed the box, he saw Tobirama give him a nod of approval, showing it was near his expectations, and he beamed in pride, and Tobirama handed him the rest of the money as he started walking out, but his eyes fell on the scrolls section of the store, and walked there. He walked to the section for chakra theory and opened one as he looked through its contents, and scoffed. Pathetic to think this passes for details of chakra theory these days. No wonder the shinobi today don't have proper basics and foundations to build upon. He thought in disgust as he resealed the scroll and kept it back, while Hideki shook his head at his expression of utter shame and disgust. There really aren't any scrolls in my shop that could live up to his expectations. It's no wonder his expression is like that, he thought as he watched Tobirama leave with a curt nod, and he waved the man off, telling him to come again. Tobirama looked up at the sky and saw the sun was over his head, meaning it was almost noon, and he still had a lot of time left to go on. I should write a scroll myself, that should do good. And maybe then he will have the proper understanding of the basics. Those pathetic excuses for basic chakra theory scrolls will do more harm to him than good, he thought, and walked back to his house and took out a blank scroll and some ink and put his brush to the metal, and kanji started flowing from his hand onto the scroll in his perfect and beautiful strokes as he wrote the details of chakra and its theory in detail to his satisfaction, and made the last stroke as he put the brush down and reread the entire thing and nodded to himself in satisfaction, rolling up the scroll and tied a small white thread over it as he stood up and gazed at the clock to see it was already evening. He was surprised that it took him so much time, and stood up and picked up the box from earlier as he put the scroll in it, and walked out towards the Uzumaki Namike's household with the box under his arm as he walked at a calm pace. Meanwhile, at the Uzumaki Namike's household, Kushina greeted all the guests warmly as she saw the various clan heads and her dear friends come in, and welcomed them all with a smile. Inoichi came with his daughter, Shikaku with his son Shikamaru, Choza with his son Choji, Mikoto with her son Sasuke, and Hayashi with his daughter Hinata, and various other clan heads with their children, and she was happy that so many had come to her children's birthday party. Hey Kushina, I'm back! She heard a shout and turned to see Jiraiya there and smiled as she gave him a small smile. Jiraiya, it's good to see you made it, she said, and he nodded with a smile as she saw Hiruzen and Tsunade enter behind him. Of course I did. I told you I'd be here to help the twins with the training, and I am not going to break my promise, you know, he said, smiling, and she nodded with a smile as she ushered him in. Naruto meanwhile was looking at the door and saw that it was almost the time and thought that he wouldn't come now. Who was I kidding? I only met him yesterday. It's not like he would come for me anyways, he thought sadly as he saw his siblings talk and play with the other children and the glances the parents were giving him from the blind side of Kushina, and looked down and walked away to the corner, not wanting to be in their vision any longer. Kushina stood up and saw that almost everyone had made it, and was about to make an announcement to cut the cake as she heard a knock and was surprised, wondering who it could be that was left. She reached to the door and gasped as she saw the stoic face of Tobirama Senju standing there in front of her. She didn't expect him to come. Hell, he was the last person on earth she expected to come to such a social gathering, knowing his reputation of thinking of them as a waste of time. She broke out of her stupor as his voice cut through the silence. I was invited here. I suppose I am not late, he said stoically, and she broke of her stupor and smiled warmly and nodded. She wondered how he had decided to come to a birthday party like this, but shook it off as she was happy and honored that he had come to meet her children, as she motioned for him to come in with a warm smile, and he gave a curt nod of acknowledgement and stepped in as the whole room became deathly quiet as soon as he stepped in, and he saw their stares and was annoyed. I hope I am not interrupting this event, he asked, and all of them looked away in embarrassment, and a moment later crowded around the most powerful Senju and the head of the Senju clan as he answered all their greetings politely, not to sound rude. He was trying to find the boy he came for, but could see everyone beside him, and their chattering about mindless clan babbles was annoying him to no end. Why a clan affairs discussion taking place at a child's birthday party, no less, he thought in annoyance, but kept his stoic mask up listening to them. Naruto was sitting on the snacks table alone going through some chips as he sat with a sad expression that he hadn't come and was wondering about the sudden silence, and then the crowded noises but shrugged it off. Suddenly Kushina clinked her glass with the spoon and gathered everyone's attention as the room became quiet, and she smiled as she spoke. "Well, as all of us are here, I guess it's time for the birthday children to cut the cake," she said, and they all nodded. She brought out a big cake on a trolley and put it in the middle of the room as she called for her children. Naruto heard it, and walked up along with Menma and Mito as Kushina took the lid off, and the whole room laughed as they saw the cake. It was a 9-tailed fox. Tobirama too smirked at seeing the cake. Ironic really, they were going to cut the 9-tailed fox, he thought in amusement. She brought her children in front as they blew the candles and cut the cake as all of them clapped, most of them only gazing at the twins, and Mito and Menma ate their slices as Naruto put one in front of Kushina, and she smiled at her little blonde bundle of joy and took a small bit as she kissed his cheek, smiling at him warmly. He always would put her ahead of everyone, she mused with a smile. My Naruto-chan has gotten really big today. 5 already, she said in a cooing voice, and he blushed a bit and nodded as she brought a slice to his mouth, and he took a bite with a smile. Tobirama saw it and smiled at seeing the child he came to see so happy, and saw that almost everyone had gathered up with their gifts as Jiraiya spoke up. Alright, I have got a special announcement for my gift, he said as everyone looked at him curiously. The Toad clan of Mt. Maiboku has asked me that if they find a child from their previous summoner's family worthy enough, then I should let them sign the Toad contract, he said as they all were wide-eyed, including Kushina, with only Tobirama being indifferent to the matter. A summoning contract promised at such a young age was essentially like taking the children as his apprentice already, he mused as he saw through his gift as a means to take the children on as apprentices if the Toads approve of them when they finally grow up. So I offer the Toad contract to Mito and Menma, he said, and the whole room clapped happily as Tobirama frowned while Kushina was stunned at the announcement, as both gazed at the bit sad look on Naruto's face, and Kushina took him by the arm forcefully to the side and glared at him. Jiraiya, what is the meaning of this? Why not Naruto too? She hissed in a low voice, and he was confused and then stared at her blankly as he spoke up. Kushina, the Toads need a worthy and powerful summoner by their side. Mito and Menma, when trained to control their powers, will be a force to be reckoned with, and 3 summoners is excessive and may anger the Toads. Sarutobi-sensei agreed with me on this, he said, and she frowned as she saw the point but then pressed her point. Then you could have done this in private later on. Why announce it in front of everyone, making Naruto feel left out? She hissed angrily, and he was stunned as he thought of it that way and nodded hesitantly, seeing his mistake. Well, I wanted to gift it to them as a birthday present, I didn't realize it that way, you know, he said, and she sighed and nodded. At least he was accepting his mistake, she thought, and moved back to the party as she saw the children getting gifts and was a little confused as she saw the different sized boxes in Mito and Menma's hands, but almost the same sized packages in Naruto's, but didn't pay it much heed since they were all gifts after all. Naruto felt the packages in his hands as he saw that almost all of them were clothes from the light weight and softness, and gazed at his siblings' presents, and saw them opening many new kunai and shuriken sets along with toys and several scrolls, and looked down a bit but put the gifts on the table, not bothering to open them since he knew what they were, and moved to the porch and towards his personal spot at his favorite tree branch, and sat as he watched the moon while Kushina was there greeting and meeting, chatting away with the guests, and Mito and Menma played with the other children happily. Tobirama saw him moving out as he saw him sitting on a tree branch gazing at the sky, and moved silently by him as he sat beside him and spoke up suddenly. I've been looking for you, he said, breaking the silence, and saw that once again he wasn't startled, and he was sure he hadn't made a single noise this time, so this time he was intrigued. Did you know I was coming behind you? He asked before Naruto could speak his answer, and Naruto nodded as he raised an eyebrow at his question. Yes, I could feel you coming from behind me. I always could if I concentrate hard enough. That is why Ka-chan has so much trouble catching and finding me after my pranks, he said, and Tobirama was stoic on the outside while on the inside he was stunned. A natural-born censor at such young an age. To pick up my presence even if I wasn't suppressing it much is a feat in itself. He mused as he was broken out of his thoughts when Naruto spoke up. Thank you, he said softly, and Tobirama looked at him confused as Naruto smiled at him, understanding his confusion. For coming. I haven't known you for long, but you still came and kept your promise. It means a lot to me, he said, and Tobirama smiled warmly as he put his hand on his head and smiled at the boy. Happy birthday, he said, and Naruto smiled widely as he hugged the man, and Tobirama chuckled as he patted and rubbed his back softly. Naruto felt so happy that he had kept his word and had come just for him. He broke the hug off as Tobirama took out the present from behind him and handed it to him. Naruto saw the elegant and expensive-looking box and looked at him with a raised eyebrow as Tobirama smirked. You thought I wouldn't bring a present? Go on and open it, let's see if you like what I got you, he said as Naruto's eyes widened in surprise and he saw the box again as he pulled the thread binding the lids slowly and thought of how expensive the gift must be if the box was any indication. He opened it, and his eyes shot open in surprise as he saw the set of 20 shining silver shurikens with another matching set of 20 kunai. His eyes practically sparkled as he saw how beautifully they were crafted and saw the scroll beside them and looked at him curiously. Tobirama saw his expression as he explained. That is a scroll of detailed chakra theory and its basics for beginners. I wrote it myself as I saw the utter disgusting attention to detail of the scrolls at the shop. He said, and Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the scroll in his hands and opened it a bit to see such beautiful handwriting and resealed it as he looked at the man stunned. You wrote this just for me? He asked in disbelief, not believing he would have wasted so much time for him as he looked at the scroll in amazement. Of course I did. You won't be starting out on the wrong path just at the start of your shinobi training if I have anything to say about it. He said, and Naruto nodded, amazed that the man he barely knew would do such a thing when Tobirama spoke up. You haven't seen everything yet. Go on and remove the red cloth at the bottom of the box. He said, and Naruto was confused as he kept the shining shurikens on his lap carefully as they looked like a work of art, and he didn't want to ruin them. He lifted the cloth up and saw 10 shining silver 3-pronged kunai, and his eyes widened as he took out one and held it in his hand in amazement as he gazed at with a tranced look. These were the same kunai he had used his father hold in his pictures. He kept the kunai and the shurikens along with the scroll back as he resealed the box and looked down as his blonde hair shadowed his eyes, and Tobirama was confused at his expression when he saw drops fall from his eyes, and Naruto spoke up. Thank you? You don't know how much this means to me. I feel like I have something from my father with me now. This is the best present I could ever ask for. Arigato. He whispered as he wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his shirt with a sniff and grinned at the man foxily, making him smirk. Those will help you start down your path of a shinobi well. Those kunai and shurikens are special chakra conductive, forged from chakra metal used by shinobi of really high caliber for repeated uses. Those do not rust or dull easily without being used in a deadly battle. And there are other uses for them as well, but that you will know later when you grow up. Take care of them. A shinobi is as good as the condition his equipment is in. Remember it all right. He said stoically, and Naruto grinned and nodded as he clutched the box to his chest tightly, and jumped down as Tobirama did the same and was stunned to see Naruto just shrug off the height and mused he would have already done it many times before as they walked in. Naruto went up to his room for a moment, and kept the box on his desk as he came back to the room, and he and Tobirama talked for a while as he explained him some rules of the shinobi, and how they were important, and Naruto listened to him with rapt attention. Finally, he saw everyone leaving and Tobirama stood up as Naruto smiled sadly that he had to go, and Tobirama smiled and patted his head. Don't worry, come over to my house tomorrow. After all, you still have to beat me at shogi, you know. Drop by any time. I'm idle most of the time these days. He said, and Naruto grinned and nodded as he ruffled his hair and walked out as Naruto walked him to the door, and Kushina too came to wave him off with a warm smile. She then saw the happy smile and calmness that Naruto held and smiled. She was worried that Jiraiya's stupid stunt might have hurt him, but he didn't mind it in the least. She mused and walked back happily as she saw Menma and Mito playing with their kunai and shuriken with Jiraiya happily, and she smiled as Naruto yawned a bit. Kachan, I am going to go sleep, alright. I'll see you tomorrow, good night. He said and kissed her cheek as he walked up to his room and opened the box as he took out one kunai from it and sat on his bed. He gazed at the kunai in wonder as he saw it shine in the moonlight and took the picture of his father and compared the kunai to his. It was almost the exact same except those strange markings and kanji his father's kunai held, he thought. He wondered what they were and decided to find out more about it later on, and kept the kunai and the picture under his pillow as he laid down with a smile. Kushina sat down with Jiraiya as she sighed tiredly from exhaustion, and Jiraiya asked her the question that had been bugging him throughout the night. Kushina, you didn't give the children any presents tonight. Why is that? He asked curiously, and she smiled brightly. Oh, I am going to give them the scrolls for the basic chakra theory tomorrow, and start their training tomorrow onward. They were so happy and tired today that they didn't even think about it. She said happily, and Jiraiya frowned a bit as he questioned her. Kushina, are you sure that is wise? I mean to train Naruto with the twins? He asked, and she glared at him. What do you mean, Jiraiya? She asked icily, and he sat unwavered by her gaze as he answered. I mean, is it safe for him to be around Mito and Menma? I mean, he holds the soul of the beast within him. What if the demon tries to take control over his sealed chakra when his will is weakened or is too tired to resist its influence? He said, and she was about to retort as he cut her off. I mean, when his chakra is low and he comes in contact with the beast, or if the twins lose control in between of their training. You know better than anyone the dangers of using that chakra. And you also know that the twins will need our complete attention, or they might lose control and hurt themselves or Naruto in the process. The villagers too might look at them differently if they hear them losing control to those urges. Plus, Naruto doesn't really seem like the early shinobi type. I mean, he is lazy and non-nonchalant. Let him enjoy his childhood and he will have the academy in a couple of years, and you can train him after we have made the twins have enough control over the demonic chakra to suppress their negative emotions a bit. It is all for their safety. Think about it with a cool head, Kushina, for the night, and answer me in the morning. He said and walked out of the room as he went to the guest room and left Kushina to her thoughts as she too went to her room and lied down thinking about his words and mulled over her choices. Finally, after a lot of thought, she came to a decision and nodded as she drifted off to sleep. Next morning, Naruto woke up with a yawn as he felt the sun rays hit his eyes and his cerulean blue eyes flickered open. He went to the bathroom and freshened up as he put on his simple white t-shirt and blue pants, and walked down the stairs to see Mito and Menma already there happily chatting away and Kushina preparing the breakfast. He walked up to Kushina as she felt a tug on her dress and looked down to see Naruto yawning and rubbing his eyes and smiled as she crouched down and he pecked her cheek. She did the same and ruffled his hair, smiling warmly at the little boy. "Oheo Naruto-chan," she said softly, and he smiled and nodded. "Oheo Ka-chan," he said equally softly as he went to the table and sat down. Mito saw the greeting her Aniki gave her mother every morning and smiled, with Menma feeling a bit out of place seeing their interaction, but shrugged it off and gave his brother a smile, who nodded in return. Kushina put the plates on the table as they ate in comfortable silence, and just as they finished Kushina spoke up. "Kids, I have to tell you all something," she said, and they all nodded, looking at her curiously. She looked at Mito and Menma and smiled as she spoke up. "Mito, Menma, me and Jiraiya are going to start training you in the shinobi arts from today," she said as the both of them beamed, and Naruto looked on confused at the exchange as he didn't hear her mention him. He too had a dream to be a great shinobi like his father, and always wanted to walk the path he did. Mito and Menma looked at his confused face and realized she hadn't spoken his name, and they too looked at her questionably. "Ka-chan, what about me? You didn't say my name," said Naruto in a confused voice, and she breathed in heavily and sighed, giving him a warm smile. "Naruto-chan, your training will have to wait until you start the academy. Your brother and sister need one-on-one training to control the special chakra they possess. You will have to wait a little longer, my son," she said warmly, and he looked at her confused and stunned. "But what is this special chakra that they have? Don't I have it too?" he asked, and she smiled and shook her head. "No, Naruto-chan, only Menma and Mito possess it. It is very powerful but really hard to control. It is extremely dangerous if it goes out of control, and they can hurt you or the others, or even themselves when they train or join the academy. So for your and everyone's safety you will have to wait a bit longer," she said, and he nodded a bit hesitantly, understanding her point. "Then you don't have to train me specially, just give me some tips in between and I'll try and learn things on my own," he said, and she shook her head, smiling sadly. "No, Naruto-chan, the wrong basics can ruin your future progress completely. Incomplete knowledge is more dangerous than no knowledge at all. Training in the shinobi arts the wrong way does more harm than good. Please just wait for a little while longer for your brother and sister," she said, holding his hand, softly squeezing it, and he thought about it nervously as she gave another squeeze and smiled. "For me?" she said softly, and he sighed and nodded with a small smile. "All right, I understand, Ka-chan. You can train Mito and Menma personally with Jiraiya. I'll wait and catch up to them when you have completed their training," he said, and she nodded with a huge proud smile as she pulled the blonde boy on her lap and hugged him tightly, and he hugged her back, snuggling in her embrace happily. She put her chin on his head as she rubbed his back softly and smiled proudly. He had understood what was important for his family, and had made the decision for them, and she couldn't be more proud of her son. She broke off the hug as he picked up the dishes and put them in the sink as he spoke up. "You go on, Ka-chan. Don't waste your time on the dishes, start training Mito and Menma. I'll do the dishes and then go to meet a friend of mine if that's alright," he asked, and she smiled as she kissed his forehead gently and nodded. "Of course you can go, just be careful, alright," she said, and he nodded as he looked at Menma and Mito, who were looking at him worriedly, thinking he might blame them for his loss of training, and he grinned at the two foxily. "Go on, you two, don't worry about me. You know me, this training that Ka-chan has planned for you sounds like a lot of work anyways. Now go on and don't worry, I'll catch up to you in no time," he said, and they grinned at him and nodded as he watched them leave, and he turned to the dishes as his happy mask dropped, and a sad expression came to his face, and a tear dropped on his hand as he wiped it off his cheek and looked at it confused. "I am crying, why am I crying? They need the special training more than me. Why am I being so stupid?" he asked himself as he started working on the dishes and washed his hands as he walked back to his room and saw the box on his desk and opened it, taking out the scroll that was in there and pocketed it as he walked downstairs and put on his sandals and walked back to the door to the garden as he saw the three of them training happily, and smiled at seeing their laughing faces. "I'm going," he said, and Kushina smiled and waved at him. "Alright, be careful and be back before it's dark, alright," she shouted, and he gave her a thumbs up and walked out with his hands in his pockets, and the same lazy expression like he didn't have a care in the world marred on his face. He kept walking to the northern clan district where the big Senju clan compounds were, and ignored the glances and cold stares he got completely. Senju clan compounds. He walked through the streets and watched the shops as he got near the house where Tobirama lived, asking many people for directions on the way, and was surprised that almost everyone knew him. He must be pretty well known in the village, he mused as he came up to a large house and opened the gates, walking in the stone steps, and knocked on the front door and waited as he heard the door click open and the stoic face of Tobirama Senju looking at him, and smiled at him lazily. "Yo!" he said, waving his hand lazily, and Tobirama stared at him blankly for a few moments, and Naruto stared at him right back. "That is not the proper way of greeting someone," he said stoically, and Naruto nodded. "So I've been told." he said lazily, and Tobirama motioned for him to come in, and closed the door. As they walked to the living room of the house, and Naruto slid the glass door open as he looked at the big garden with many trees and a koi fish pond on the side, and smiled as he sat down and watched the butterflies, birds and squirrels, and the cold breeze hit his face with a smile as he smelt the scent of flowers, and the smile on his face lit up. Tobirama walked back with a tray with 2 cups of green tea and some cookies as he kept them on the porch in between, and saw Naruto admiring the garden happily and smiled. So you appreciate the nature too? He asked, and Naruto smiled and nodded. Yes, but this place is different. There is something about the garden that I can't put my finger on. It's almost like it's he tried to find the right word, and Tobirama smirked. Alive? He asked, and Naruto nodded with a smile. Yes, well, this garden and its trees were grown by my elder brother himself. He had the ability to create trees, and each and every tree in this garden contains a part of his chakra. That is why the calm aura here is different from the rest of the trees in the village. I have kept it maintained ever since he died. It ties me to him, he said, and Naruto nodded with a sad smile. People can grow trees with chakra? He asked after a moment, and Tobirama smirked and shook his head. No, only my elder brother had the ability. It was a bloodline, the Mokutan. It gave him ultimate control over green life, and he could breathe life into the earth with his unique Kekii Genkai. You know what a Kekii Genkai is? He asked, and Naruto shook his head and looked at him curiously. He smirked at the curious face of the child. He always liked explaining things too. A Kekii Genkai is a unique bloodline trait passed down within a clan through blood. It is inherited genetically from generation to generation, or sometimes unique to a person like my brother. These abilities are unique to the users who possess them and can't be learned or used by those who don't possess them firsthand. Our village is pretty revered and feared for our clan secrets and strong Kekii Genkai. Kekii Genkai give the user a trump card in battle, but those who rely on it too much or think they are almighty because of them have their downfall due to this arrogance, he said, and Naruto nodded, understanding about it a bit, and thought it must be cool to have a special ability like that. Wow, your brother must have been pretty powerful, huh? He asked curiously, and Tobirama smirked and nodded. I believe so. After all, he did lay the foundation of this village and become the Shodaime Hokage, he said, and Naruto's eyes widened. Your brother was the Shodaime Hokage? He asked in disbelief, and Tobirama nodded. Naruto wanted to scoff at his claim, but he knew the man wasn't one for jokes, and then his eyes narrowed at the man. If the Shodaime Hokage was his brother, then he ran to the middle of the garden and gazed at the Hokage monument, and then at Tobirama, then at the Hokage monument, and at Tobirama again, and face-palmed. Tobirama watched on in amusement as realization dawned on the child's face. Naruto slid his hand down his face and sighed. How could I have been so blind and stupid? I look at my father's face every day and didn't even realize that the man with the second face there was with me the whole time. Stupid, 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 he said, hitting his head, and Tobirama's amusement increased as he beat himself up and then sat down beside him and took a cookie and ate it. So you must be pretty strong then, huh, old man? He asked, and Tobirama looked at him with a raised eyebrow. You know that I am the Nidaime Hokage, shouldn't you show me some respect? He asked stoically, and Naruto scoffed, as if. Take a hike. You may have been the Hokage once, but now you are an old man and I respect you, but not that much that I would call you Tobirama-sama or something. Respect is earned, not given out by titles, he said, and Tobirama nodded with a smile. He liked the kid, and his answer made him like him even more. He too agreed with him that respect was earned, not given out. If that was the case, then Hiruzen's traitorous student was a Sannin, and should be respected by everyone for his title, he mused. And he didn't like people kissing up to him anyways. You have a pretty interesting views on people, I must say, he said, and Naruto smirked and nodded as Tobirama pulled out the shogi board and both of them got into the game. Tobirama won all the games, of course, and put it off as both were tired and strained from focusing too much. They sat silently as Naruto asked him a question. Hey old man, you knew my father, right? He asked, and Tobirama nodded as he gazed at the trees with Naruto by his side and took a gulp of water. What was he like? He asked, and Tobirama smiled slightly at the question and answered it to the best of his abilities. He was a great man. A good leader and held kindness and compassion for everyone. I didn't know him too much or too closely, but I respected him. He was only one of the few who ever gained my respect. He never once hesitated to do anything for the village or his family for as long as I saw him. He really was a great man indeed, he said, and Naruto nodded with a smile. You know I want to be like him. Strong and respected, fearless, not afraid of anything. I want to be able to look him in the eye and feel confident enough that I would have made him proud if he were here. That's my dream, he said, and Tobirama smiled and nodded. That's an admirable goal. I believe through hard work and lot of blood and sweat anything can be achieved. Plus, you have the heritage and lineage along with the resources to be great. Not many have the kind of support and parents that could train them from such young an age with the correct things that are needed, he said, and waited for Naruto to agree, but it never came, and looked at him as he had a sad expression on his face. Not everyone who has that kind of people gets an easy start, you know. he whispered, and Tobirama was confused at his answer and was about to ask what he meant, but Naruto grinned, putting his mask on as he gazed at the sky and saw it was a little time from now to sunset, and stood up. It's time to leave, old man. Kaachan told me to come back before it was dark. I'll see you tomorrow, alright? He said happily, and Tobirama nodded with a smile as Naruto put his hands in his pockets and walked to his home waving at him. Tobirama watched him go, and his last words rang in his mind that he didn't understand. Not everyone who has that kind of people gets an easy start, you know. The words rang through his mind and he frowned. Everyone who knew Tobirama Senju knew he didn't like unanswered questions, and this was one answer he was going to find out. Naruto walked home right before sunset and saw that his mother and siblings were outside training, and he went to the fridge and got a bottle of water and went to sit down on the table as they all came in with happy smiles on their faces. Kushina smiled as she saw Naruto and sat down with the twins. So Naruto-chan, how was your day? She asked, and he smiled at her. It was good, Kaachan, I had fun, he said, and she smiled and nodded as they started talking about the day's training, and he listened in on everything with a smile and had nothing to add on to it. Kushina asked the twins if they wanted to eat out to celebrate their start of training, and they smiled and nodded, shouting sushi. Naruto smiled at seeing them so happy. He never really liked sushi much, but he smiled and said nothing seeing their happy expressions. He stood up and put on his sandals and listened to them talk about various things he didn't really get, but listened to them curiously in hopes that maybe he could pick up something useful too, but didn't have any luck. Their explanations were too vague to be of any use, and they entered the sushi bar as they took a table and ordered their food. Kushina would ask him about him, but he didn't really have anything that interesting to add and just gave her short answers with a smile and mostly listened in on their talks. He supposed they were too excited with the new training and didn't really want to divert their attention from their interests, and ate silently. They walked home as Kushina saw the tired faces of the twins and the usual lazy expression of her son, and walked on home with a smile. She herself was pretty tired, and the rest of the trip was made in silence. Kushina and the twins instantly went to bed to take off their exhaustion, and Naruto went to his room and locked it as he ran a hand through his pocket and touched the scroll and looked at it curiously. He saw the time and saw that it was still only dinner time, and they had slept early. He put up an alarm on the clock for early that morning and decided to read the scroll with a fresh mind in the morning, and laid on his bed as he gazed at the three-pronged kunai in his hand and kept it under his pillow and went to sleep. Uzumaki Namake's household. It was really early in the morning. The sun was nowhere to be seen, and the moon still shone in the sky as our favorite sun-kissed blonde-haired hero's room rang up with the beeping of his alarm clock. Tapping its button and stopped it as he woke up with a yawn and stretched, going to the bathroom, and washed his face to rid himself of his sleepiness, and walked down into the kitchen. He took out a bottle of milk and drank it as he walked back to his room and put on his desk lamp and unrolled the scroll that Tobirama had gifted him. He started reading it as he took a gulp of milk and went through its contents. Chakra is essentially the life force that is comprised of two energies: physical energy, or the yang part of one's chakra. It is built up over time through training one's body vigorously in many ways and increases as the person grows physically. It is collected through each and every cell of one's body and accumulated by our body as the stamina that we use to do our daily jobs and lives. It can be increased through training, stimulants, and exercise. Spiritual energy, or the yin part of one's chakra. It is built over time through training one's mind vigorously in many ways and increases as the person grows mentally. It is derived through one's consciousness and builds up over time with the experience a person's mind gains. It can be increased through studying, meditation, and experience. When these two energies are molded in perfect harmony, that is when chakra is created. Training the body in different types of exercises will build up your physical energy, whereas studying and practicing the techniques you learn and develop over time repeatedly increases a person's spiritual energy. Doing either of these naturally develops one's chakra reserves. Each person naturally is affiliated to one type of energy more, either the yin energy or the yang energy. Practicing one's naturally affiliated energy more in turn creates more powerful and stronger techniques in the fields the person trains in. Chakra is found in everyone, whether it be civilian or shinobi. The moment a person runs completely out of chakra, the person dies. Near exhaustion of chakra is equally as dangerous as exhausting it completely, and is called chakra exhaustion. This is not taken care of properly can also lead to fatal outcomes. If a person is low on chakra, it is advisable to rest, eat, and sleep until he recovers safely. Naruto read the first part of chakra theory carefully, and didn't understand all of it. He took a pencil and started underlining the parts he didn't get, and reread the parts again, and finally after 5 times he had memorized it word for word and saw that the sun was coming up. So it had been 2 hours already, he mused as he walked down, and saw everyone still asleep, and pulled out 2 apples from the fridge, and walked to his room as he saw the wooden box on his desk, and pulled out 2 kunai and 4 shuriken and pocketed them with the apples, and walked down as he wrote down a note, and stuck it on the fridge as he stepped out of the house and towards the Senju clan compounds. Kushina woke up with a yawn and went to Menma and Mito's room and woke them up as they grumbled and woke up, going into the bathroom to freshen up. She walked into Naruto's room knowing her son's laziness, and went to wake him up as she saw the bed made up, and knocked the bathroom but found it open as she saw it to be empty, and was confused as she stepped downstairs to the living room and dining area and found it empty. Her gaze stopped at the fridge as she saw the note stuck on it, and pulled it off as she read it. Ka-chan, I woke up early and have gone for an early morning walk. Be back by breakfast, don't worry. She read the note with the chibi Naruto grinning at the end and giggled at his endings that he always left in his notes, and put it in her pocket as she put on her apron and started working on the breakfast. Senju Clan Compounds. Open Training Fields. Naruto walked to the Senju compounds as he had read the board for the open training compounds that were free to use for everyone and walked into them, and saw that no one was there, and they were entirely empty. He was confused as to why no one would use such big and beautiful compounds but shrugged and walked to the middle of the training compounds as he saw a lake by the side and 3 stumps in the middle of the clearing. Perfect, he thought, walking up to the stumps as he took out a kunai and started scratching a bullseye on it. He took out the 2 kunai and 4 shuriken from his pockets, and stood a few feet away from the stump with the bullseye and decided to start with the shuriken. He had seen the academy students doing this at his one time sneaking in the academy, and knew that this would be in the course, so why not improve his accuracy now to help in the future? It wasn't dangerous, and didn't need any sort of theory to it, so it couldn't be that hard, he mused as he took the 2 stars in each of his hands and threw them one by one, and all of them swung in the air a bit, and around the stump into the 2 stumps besides it, and sweat dropped as they made contact, and bounced off of them and dropped on the ground unceremoniously. Maybe kunai would be easier since shuriken were giving him a hard time, he thought. He held each of the kunai in his hands and pulled his hands back and threw them one by one with full power as he saw them sail over the stump, and sweat dropped again with a sigh as he walked up and retrieved them. He went to the starting point, and tried again with the same results, and sighed. This would be an interesting morning. He was extremely lazy, but there was one thing that people didn't know about Naruto Namikaze. Once he set his mind on a goal, Naruto did not give up. He tried it again and again as the sound of sailing weapons and clanking of shuriken on the stumps or the ground was heard. As time passed, he dropped to the ground on his back after 3 hours and panted. His arms were dead tired from the repeated attempts, and his legs too, with all the retrievals running again and again. Even after all that work, there were no results. His aim was way too off, and his technique wasn't right, since if they made contact even on the wrong targets, they just bounced off. He sat up and looked at the shuriken and kunai with his red palms that were aching, and his eyes held a disappointed look as he pocketed them again. He wished he could bring more and have to retrieve them less, but his tiny pockets could only carry so much as he bit off the apple and walked away from the training grounds completely unaware of a pair of eyes watching his progress. He walked back to his house and the smell of food hit his nostrils and his stomach rumbled, and he walked in and sat on the table with Menma and Nito as Kushina kept the plates, and looked at him curiously. Where did you go to, Naruto-chan? She asked, and he smiled a bit as he started eating and spoke up as he chewed and swallowed his food. I woke up early and went for a walk. I found a nice calm place and fell asleep. It's really nice in the morning on the outside. Maybe I'll do it every day, he said, and started eating as she smiled and nodded. Maybe he was getting out of his laziness a bit too if he was waking up early now, even if he slept outside a bit. That's great, Naruto-chan. Morning air is good for health and you get to enjoy the calmness that you like so much too, she said happily, and he nodded, drinking the juice, and kept the glass down as she saw his palms that were scratched and a bit red and was confused. Naruto-chan, what happened to your hands? She asked, and he cursed inwardly and smiled at her. Nothing really. The tree that I found to sleep was really hard to climb on, and I must have scratched my hands on it. It's nothing really, he said, and she smiled and nodded as she continued eating and talked to the twins, who were surprised too at their brother's newfound sleeping habits, but got into a conversation with Kushina about the day's training, and Naruto listened to everything curiously, but to his disappointment again their descriptions were way too vague for him to use. He didn't like to lie to his mother or the siblings, but he wanted to train and didn't want to be left behind the other kids who would start the academy too. Plus, if he told her, she may stop him from going or may confiscate his weapons and scroll altogether, and that was something he couldn't let happen to him. He saw as they started to walk out after finishing their breakfast, and he stood up too as he started to walk out. Ka-chan, I'll go to my friend now, alright, I'll be back by sunset, he said, putting on his sandals, and Kushina smiled and nodded as she too walked out into the clearing as Jiraiya came up too. Alright, but be careful and don't get hurt, she said, and he shouted a hi and walked out. He pocketed his hands with his usual lazy expression and was surprised that he had forgotten to put the weapons back in the box, but thought he could put them there later on. He walked towards the Senju compounds once again, but this time towards Tobirama's house. Senju clan compounds. Naruto walked up to the Senju clan compounds and to Tobirama's gate as he stepped in on the stone steps and knocked on the door as the stoic face of Tobirama opened the door. He smiled at him with his lazy expression as Tobirama crossed his arms and stared at him stoically. Yo! He said, lazily waving his hands, and Tobirama stared at him for a few moments, and he stared right back. You aren't going to greet properly anytime soon, are you? He asked stoically, and Naruto smiled and shook his head lazily. Nope, he said simply, and Tobirama stepped aside and motioned for him to come in as he sat on the porch from yesterday and saw the shogi board already there, and smiled as he took a seat and arranged the pieces while Tobirama came with some hot chocolate and cake and put the tray to the side and took his seat as he tapped the clock, making his first move with Naruto doing the same. They played like that for an hour as Tobirama spoke up, breaking the silence. So what happened to your hands? He asked stoically and moved his piece, taking one of his out, and Naruto frowned as he thought of his next move. Nothing much, just overdid something, he said, speaking the half-truth, and Tobirama nodded. He already knew of the reason. While walking through the clan compounds on his early morning walk, he had heard some metal clangs in the training grounds that hadn't been used by anyone in years, and had seen him going at the targets until he dropped, and he admired his determination. He had also seen his raw attempts and techniques that told him that he had no guidance whatsoever, and was his first attempt, which troubled him to no end. Why hadn't his shinobi training started, and why was he practicing alone when he had heard from Tsunade that the red-headed twins had started their training as she had been told by Jiraiya? This was another unanswered question about the blonde enigma in front of him that troubled him as he moved his piece and captured his king, saying checkmate as Naruto sighed and drank his hot chocolate that was now cold, and ate the cake, with Tobirama doing the same as they watched the open garden, silently enjoying the peace and calmness of nature. Naruto broke the silence as he spoke up. Hey old man, is there some technique to throwing shuriken and kunai? He asked, and Tobirama smirked and nodded. Yes, there is a certain way. Not many people delve into the precision and accuracy required for Shurikenjutsu, he said as Naruto looked at him confused, and he explained. The art of throwing weapons, he said, and Naruto nodded in understanding and memorized the word. Most people just practice how to hit the target and improve their aim and never go into the intricacies of the art. They think of them as mere distraction tools or things to be tied with flash tags or exploding tags and just write them off as just a basic need, not needing any time for perfection, he said, and Naruto nodded as he listened to each and every word curiously, making Tobirama smirk as he explained further. Shurikenjutsu is just as dangerous as any other art of the shinobi arts if mastered properly. There are many techniques that could be combined with them, and can be lethal if done by a master user of Shurikenjutsu. They help a shinobi in the art of trap making too, since a master of Shurikenjutsu can make the best traps for ambushes and trapping his enemies in the field, he said, and Naruto nodded and was amazed at the knowledge the man held. He must be the most knowledgeable of all the Hokages, he mused and nodded, memorizing every word carefully, and was really interested in this art. If what the old man was true, then it could be really powerful. Have you had troubles with your throwing weapons? He asked suddenly, and Naruto broke off his thoughts and nodded sadly. Yes, honestly, even I at first thought that I just had to practice my aim and just learn how to throw them, since it looked to be easy and not dangerous enough, requiring no techniques. I didn't know that it was such an intricate art with so many complex things, he said, and Tobirama nodded and was surprised at the vocabulary the kid held at his age and how he had understood his whole explanation completely and taken it to heart. That is a common assumption people make. Every shinobi technique is an art that needs proper technique and knowledge to pull off correctly, no matter how simple it seems. The simple techniques are sometimes the most lethal ones when used by an expert. Never underestimate anything. Even a Kage can die by the hands of a genin when he uses clever deceptions and the most basic of techniques correctly in sync, and the opponent underestimates him, he said stoically, and Naruto nodded. Again, his knowledge about the shinobi world amazed him, and he respected the man even more. Tobirama wanted to ask him why his mother hadn't helped his technique in any way. From what he saw in the morning was any indication. Naruto sat silently for a few moments and fiddled with his feet for a few moments as he spoke up. Say, old man, can you help me with Shurikenjutsu? Your knowledge in the art seems to pretty nice, and I would be grateful if you could help me a little, he asked, and Tobirama smiled and put his hand on his head, making Naruto smile. He always felt warmly when he did that. He thought that maybe this was what it felt like to have a father figure in his life. Of course I can. I don't really have anything else to do, and it would be nice to help you refine your basics to the level of perfection that Mai demands. But it will take a lot of time and hard work. He was cut off as Naruto spoke up in a confident voice. Don't worry about that, old man. Naruto Namikaze is lazy, but the one thing that I don't know how to do is quit or go back on my word. And I give you my word, I'll try my hardest to learn if you would teach me, he said, and Tobirama smirked at the confidence the boy held and the power and shine behind those eyes and nodded with a smirk. Very well then. Do you have your kunais and shuriken? He asked, and Naruto nodded, taking them out, and Tobirama rose an eyebrow as he saw him take them out from his tiny pockets and walked in as Naruto looked on confused when Tobirama came back and threw him something that he caught and looked at him questionably, looking at the strange things in his hands. Those are the hip pouch and leg holsters for holding your weapons safely and giving you easier access to them. Your pockets won't be able to hold the weapons easily, and it is dangerous that way. I used to use them when I was a kid, so they aren't that new, but they should get the job done. He was cut off as Naruto hugged the man happily, and he rubbed his back softly and patted his head with a smile. Arigato, you're the best, old man. And these are better than any new ones. I'll take these over new ones any day, he said as he strapped on the hip pouch to his belt, and Tobirama showed him how to strap on the leg holster as he kept the weapons properly, and saw how much better it felt as Tobirama walked to the clearing and Naruto followed him, and they came up to the wooden dummies shaped like humans as Naruto saw the marks they held showing how many hits they had taken and turned to Tobirama, who crossed his arms over his chest and looked at him sternly, and he looked at him with a determined gaze. Alright, show me your throw and I shall see and correct you as well as tell you the technique needed, and refine your aiming skills too, he said, and Naruto nodded as he looked at the various dummies side by side and threw the kunai and shuriken with the same results, and looked down in shame at his failure, and Tobirama frowned at his lack of technique, and walked up to him as he looked up as Tobirama pulled his own kunai out, and told him to watch him carefully. He saw Tobirama just flick a wrist and looked like he didn't even try using any force as he flicked the kunai at the wooden dummy, and it made contact with a loud thump and moved back a bit, making his eyes widen in shock. Applying brute force is unnecessary. Look what I did with the correct technique and a mere flick of the wrist. Now when you throw it, don't use excessive force. Relax your hands and arms and flick your wrist just as you were about to release it, he said, and explained to him, showing him the correct way. Naruto tried it a few times and saw his aim improving by quite a bit, and smirked as he threw kunai after kunai, covering the several dummies with them, and smirked as he saw the improvement, and how much energy he saved, and Tobirama nodded, handing him some shuriken. Shuriken are entirely different from kunai. They need much more precision and an extremely accurate throw to spin them correctly, completely horizontal to the throw and right on the mark. These need accurate movement of the fingers too. Watch this, he said, and launched 4 shuriken from his left hand. The shuriken flew gently through the air where they landed on the target completely vertically with loud thumps, and the target skid a bit. Naruto's eyes glimmered slightly in awe as he still couldn't comprehend the awesomeness of elegance over brute power. Maybe he could do it like that one day if he practiced enough, he thought, while Tobirama showed him the technique, and he tried it. It was hard as he again bent his arms and used a lot of force by habit, upon which he would be bonked on the head and reprimanded. A lot of bonks and thumps later there was just a little improvement as he saw the sun almost setting. He panted, keeping his hands on his knees, while Tobirama smirked with his arms crossed as he watched the little boy. The kid had a lot of stamina for his age, and his talent was hidden, waiting to be brought out from the vast improvement and the speed at which he was learning the technique. That was good. We shall continue this tomorrow, he said stoically, and Naruto nodded with a tired but happy grin and took off his holster and hip pouch, and Tobirama looked at him confused. Say, do you have a storage scroll, old man? He asked, and Tobirama nodded but looked at him confused as Naruto explained. I don't want to carry them all the way home like this. It's just way too much work, you know, he said, and Tobirama sighed, face palming. The kid went through hours of vigorous training without complaints, but was lazy to carry his own equipment on him back home. He really was something alright, he thought with an amused smile, and nodded as he went into his house while Naruto stood in the garden with a sad smile across his face. Plus, my family might ask me where I got them or what I am doing with shinobi equipment strapped on me, he thought sadly as Tobirama sealed the stuff for him and handed him the scroll that he took and thanked the man and walked out, waving at him lazily. Tobirama watched his back as he walked out and went into his house with a smile. He had forgotten how good it felt to teach someone young and help forge them into promising shinobi, and that blonde held a hell of a lot of untapped potential. Naruto walked home and stepped in as he saw Kushina and his siblings doing some strange things, making some kind of patterns with them, and looked on curiously, then went to the kitchen and took a can of juice and sat on the table as he watched his family come in along with Jiraiya and were laughing at a joke Jiraiya made. They sat down on the table and Kushina looked at him with a smile as she saw his tired face and was happy that he had started playing now. So Naruto-chan, how was your day? She asked, and Naruto smiled warmly at his mother. It was great, I had a lot of fun, but it was too tiring, he said lazily, and she giggled and ruffled his hair as Jiraiya spoke up. The twins are great, Kushina. They will be one hell of a shinobi after the legendary Jiraiya is done with them, he said proudly, and they all laughed at the man while Naruto smiled at his family's happiness. He didn't find his godfather all that great anyways, but are those kunai and shuriken things really necessary? Whined Menma at his day's several failures, and Mito nodded, and Kushina looked at them happily as she giggled. This caught Naruto's interest as he listened in carefully. Don't worry, it won't be that long. We just have to get your aim up to par, and then you could just practice it once in a while to keep your aim good, and we can move on to the other important stuff, Jiraiya said, and Kushina nodded, telling them the same thing while Naruto frowned inwardly at their blatant disrespect of the art of Shurikenjutsu. It was one hell of an art, from how he saw Tobirama make damage with such a low amount of effort in his throws, and how he had told him that there were even various techniques for them. He didn't say anything, not wanting to answer any unnecessary questions, and realized how good a teacher the old man was as compared to the pervert here. He listened to him goad his siblings about the cool techniques he had to teach them when they were done with the basics, and frowned inwardly again. He remembered the old man's words about the importance of basics, and how a genin could beat a Kage even with basics, and it was fools like him who underestimated them and got killed. He agreed to every word the old man made, and how his every word made perfect sense as he tuned his family's conversation out, and remembered the things he learned today and the rush he felt at learning those things. He liked it, and that was something he was going to do again and again. They had dinner with all of them, making small talk with him, all the while going on about their day's events, and he just listened in on them with a smile and walked back to his room as he kept the storage scroll in the box beside the Chakra Theory one, and went to sleep with an alarm for early next morning, and went to sleep with a happy smile in his face. Next morning, Naruto again woke up early to the sound of the alarm beeping and woke up as he clicked it off and did the usual routine of washing his face and grabbing some milk as he sat on his desk with the desk lamp on, and unrolled the scroll he had. There is a special circulatory system in our bodies for chakra, and it is released through the 361 chakra points or tenketsu found in the body. Chakra is molded through the combination of 12 basic hand seals which aid a shinobi in molding chakra to their needs. These are Saru, Tatsu, Natori Mi, Ashi Inu, Uma, Tora I, Hitsuji Yu. When unlocking the chakra for the first time, the Hitsuji hand seal helps focus one's chakra and is a basic hand seal used for focusing. There are several other unique seals used for different techniques specifically too. To unlock one's chakra for the first time, the best method is to meditate and try and find a warm pull of energy near your lower abdomen region and pull on it. Naruto read through the scroll and saw the pictures of the chakra circulatory system as he tried to memorize it, and the hand seals, specifically the Ram, Hitsuji, seal to finally try and unlock his chakra. He saw the sun rays hitting the desk and walked to the bathroom. Taking a quick shower as he changed into his clothes and grabbed some fruits as he walked out with the scroll on chakra theory in his hands straight towards the Senju clan compounds to the training fields. Senju clan compounds. Naruto walked into the training field from yesterday and opened up the scroll, rereading the part about unlocking one's chakra, and copied the Ram hand seal and sat in a lotus position and closed his eyes and did as the scroll said to do. He tried to clear his mind as best as he could and tried to find the pull the scroll told him about. Tobirama stood behind a tree with his arms crossed and his chakra signature concealed as he watched the boy read the scroll and meditate. He knew what the boy was doing, his first attempts at unlocking his chakra. Now he understood everything. If he was trying everything from the scroll on his own, learning Shurikenjutsu on his own, hiding his weapons in a storage scroll yesterday, and so much training outside either alone or with him. His family wasn't training him, so he took matter in his own hands. But the question that was left was, why weren't they training him? He decided to put it in the back of his mind as he watched the boy's breathing become calm and uniform after half an hour, and was surprised at his skill and patience for meditation, but figured he always was one to like the calmness more. He sat down and watched him meditate for 2.5 hours. The unlocking of one's chakra was really difficult without proper guidance. He had written everything on the scroll in detail, but still someone would need to tell the boy to focus on a particular point, and not try to just clear his mind. And even if he did figure it out, it took at least a week to. His thoughts were cut off as he watched Naruto with wide eyes. Naruto sat there, and he felt like he was in a trance, and it felt so good after some time when he lost touch of the outside world and then focused inwardly on the pull the scroll said to find and kept looking for. He didn't know for how long, but suddenly he felt a warm pull and saw a small blue light in the darkness of his mind as he pulled on the energy, and felt new energy course through his veins. Dense purple chakra erupted from his body as it swirled around him, and the ground under him cracked and pebbles rose in the air, turning to dust as they came in contact with his chakra while it swirled around him wildly. Naruto smirked as he felt the energy. It was so powerful. There was no way that it wasn't chakra, so this was what it felt like. He liked it. It felt like a part of him had been found that was hidden away. Tobirama stood up in shock as he felt the density of his chakra and the amounts he was releasing. In just 30 seconds he had released a low genin reserve's worth of chakra and was still going. Amazing, the kid unlocked his chakra on his own. Such powerful and dense chakra. I haven't felt such ungodly density in one's chakra ever since. His thoughts trailed off as he saw Naruto's chakra recede and his eyes open as he smiled widely and tried to stand up. His legs felt wobbly and he decided to go home and rest when he took a step and his mind blanked out as he started falling face first, and Tobirama appeared in front of him in an instant and caught the boy and picked him up in his arms with a small smile as he gazed at the smiling blonde face. He really is something else, all right. To think he managed to unlock it on his own, and that too on his first try. But the idiot went overboard and released everything he had in but a few moments. Now let's get him home and put him to bed and let's see what really is going on there. He thought and started walking towards the Uzumaki Namikaze's household with the little blonde bundle sleeping in his arms as Naruto snuggled in his arms, making him smile. Uzumaki Namikaze's household. Tobirama walked in as he stealthily made his way up the wall of the house and stood the window to the room where he saw the box he had gifted him lying on the desk, confirming it was his room, and tucked the boy into his bed and watched him sleep for a moment, and jumped out the window and on the roof as he heard the noises coming from the gardens and suppressed his signature completely, and watched Kushina and Jiraiya train the twins, and his eyes narrowed. So only Naruto wasn't getting trained since he was out, and they had already started their training. He watched the kids try and unlock their chakra and waited to see the results, but the redheads were too impatient to sit in a place for that long, and didn't succeed. They were quite different from Naruto, he observed. The lazy blonde, when put his mind to something, wouldn't fall back until he was done, but these kids were different. He saw the pervert telling them they could learn cool things later if they mastered the basics fast, and scoffed inwardly. People like him are the reason why children don't have the proper foundation nowadays. Why don't shinobi these days value the basics? Even I use them till date, and rely on them more than my stronger techniques. He thought as he watched them try and work on their accuracy, and aiming with the most basic of things being taught to them, and telling them to improve their aims and berated them once again for their teachings, and watched as they gave the twins a break, and went inside as he heard the conversation that he was waiting for. "I wish Aniki was here too. Why doesn't he have special chakra like us?" asked Mito sadly, and Menma nodded as he thought of his brother. "Yeah, but there is nothing we could do. We don't want to hurt him if we lose control like Jiraiya Aji-san told us, and Ka-chan said he would be trained in the academy and by her after our training was done. So let's get strong quickly and get him to join us," he said, and Mito nodded with a smile, and Tobirama had heard all that he needed to and walked back into Naruto's room as he watched the boy sleep and pondered on what he heard for a few moments, sitting on his desk. So they were not training him with them so that when they lost control they wouldn't hurt Naruto. He knew that Jiraiya wanted the boy out of his way so that he doesn't interfere with their training, and Kushina had agreed with that pervert. What the hell had Hiruzen taught his students? If not for him, Tsunade too would be out gambling and drinking away instead of taking the problems head on and live like a stupid hippie. Then his thoughts went to his little blonde and remembered the chakra and the untapped talent he had. The boy was a natural-born censor, and was indeed a prodigy if he had made it that far on his own just through reading and patience. If it went on like this, his skills would be wasted, and the academy didn't have the time or focus to attend to one student specifically, and he would have a hard time if he had to the things the way academy did, and after the reconditioning of the curriculum their focus too was on the barest minimum of the basics. He pondered on what to do as he then thought of himself. He didn't really have anything to do, and maybe if what he thought lay dormant in the boy came out someday he could train it to the maximum potential and help him from falling to the darker parts of the power. Maybe he could train a student that was worthy enough to be called his heir. He wouldn't make the same mistakes he made with his previous students. He would train him personally in the way a true shinobi should, and show the village the potential the boy had. Yes, looks like I have found a new apprentice. Maybe he'll inherit my legacy and make me proud of him to have nurtured a student who was worthy to be my legacy. I owe it to his father too. After all, if I hadn't dropped the techniques through my weakness all those years ago, he would be trained by him and not left alone like this. The villagers' hatred will drive him into the darkness with the neglect, and I won't let that happen. He deserves better. I'll nurture him with my own 2 hands and make him into a fine shinobi. He thought with finality as he tore a page from his notebook and started writing a note, and left it by his bedside under the clock and left through the window back to his house with a smile. Uzumaki Namake's household. Kushina walked in after some morning training with the twins before breakfast. She had seen Naruto left early to go for his walk. She came in and saw that Naruto's sandals were there on the front, and walked upstairs as she saw him asleep in a deep slumber, and smiled at his tired face as she walked to his bed. Menma followed her and saw her crouch down on his brother's bed, and saw as she rubbed his head softly and brushed his hair, as she kissed his forehead softly, and he smiled in his sleep while she brought the blanket up a bit to let her lazy little blonde sleep in today, and stood up. Menma went down, not wanting to be seen like the spying kind, and walked down. He knew his mother loved his brother the most, even if she won't admit it. That made him a bit sad as well as a happy as he sat on the dining table and Kushina served the breakfast. "Ka-chan, where's Aniki?" asked Mito as she smiled at the thought of the sleeping blonde. "Well, looks like our lazy little blonde has been playing outside in the morning. He is dead tired, so let him sleep in. I'll put the breakfast by his bedside so that he can have it when he wakes up," she said, and Mito smiled and nodded as they finished the breakfast. Kushina walked up to his room and kept the tray on his desk as she sat on his bed and brought his head softly on her lap and brushed his hair as he snuggled in her embrace, making her smile. She rubbed his whiskers softly as he purred and leaned into her hand, making her giggle softly as she held him to her for a while, then laid his head back on the pillow and walked out after kissing his cheek softly, closing the door behind her. She walked down to see the twins already training with Jiraiya and called out to him. "Hey Jiraiya, can you take over their training for a while today?" she asked, and he grinned and nodded as she smiled and moved back upstairs. She hadn't been able to spend much time with the blonde joy she had, and moved back to his room as she got beside him in his bed and leaned on an elbow and brushed his hair softly as he cuddled up to her in her chest, while she smiled as she held her little blonde in her arms and kept brushing his hair softly. Naruto woke up to feel himself cuddled in something really warm and knew what it was immediately as he happily snuggled in his mother's arms as he yawned and cracked one of his eyes open to look up and see the smiling face of his mother. He rose up a bit to peck her cheek with a smile to snuggle in her arms once again. "So what has my little blonde been up to in the mornings to be so tired?" she asked teasingly, and he smiled a bit, remembering his success at unlocking his chakra, and said nothing as he held her tightly, and she too hugged him back. "Why aren't you training Menma and Mito Ka-chan?" he asked, and she smiled at him. "Jiraiya has taken over for a while and I have to take care of my lazy prankster too, you know," she said, and he grinned foxily and nodded as he sat up, and she brought the tray on her lap and fed him. He himself fed her, and she ate, giggling as they spent some time together, and Naruto got up stretching a bit as he turned to her with a smile. "Arigato Ka-chan, for spending time with me," he said softly, and she smiled and kissed the top of his head and hugged him. "I love spending time with my cute child now, don't I?" she teased, and he smiled and muttered a hi, hugging her happily. No matter what, he loved her the most. He let her go and looked at her with a smile. You should go and see their training, Ka-chan. I'll be going out for a bit, he said, and she nodded as she left him alone with a smile. Now Naruto looked at the clock and saw that it was almost noon, and wondered how he had slept so long. Then his mind turned back gears and his eyes widened. How the hell had he reached back home? The last thing he remembered was blacking out in the training fields. Then his eyes narrowed at the note under the clock and picked it up and opened it to find a familiar handwriting and read it. You blacked out at the training fields from chakra exhaustion, and I brought you home out of everyone's eyesight. Meet me at my home when you wake up. We have some things to discuss. Tobirama Senju. He smiled as he tore the note apart and threw it in the dustbin. So the old man had figured out his secret training already. He smiled and walked down as he put on his sandals and saw the twins training with Jiraiya and Kushina and shouted, "I'm going!" He shouted and Kushina turned back and waved at him. "Alright, be careful and don't overdo anything, alright?" She shouted back and nodded and moved out into the streets and towards the Senju clan compounds. Senju clan compounds. Naruto walked into Tobirama's home after his usual way of greeting and their occasional staring and sat down at his usual spot as Tobirama put some snack and tea in between them and sat down on the porch. So your family hasn't been training you? He stated more than asked, and Naruto nodded, already knowing he must have figured everything out by now. Yes, I don't have the special chakra that my siblings have and they need the extra training more than me. Ka-chan told me to wait until she had trained them enough to start training me, he said, and Tobirama nodded at his answer. Then why are you training by yourself? Why not wait for the academy or your mother to teach you? He asked curiously, and Naruto smiled. I don't want to be left behind. Everyone my age has started their training and I can't waste my time sitting around sleeping while everyone gets ahead of me. If I want to complete my dream of making my father proud and be as strong as him one day, each day wasted is a step farther from my dream, he said, and Tobirama nodded with a smile. The kid had a heart of gold, he mused. I have decided to train you and take you on as my apprentice, he stated stoically, and Naruto looked at him with eyes as wide as saucers and asked the one question that rang through his head. Why? He asked, and Tobirama smirked. You have potential, the drive to train till you drop. You will be great if trained properly, and the neglect of your training will stunt your growth, both physically and mentally. I will not let a child with potential as great as yours be stopped from growing, and I believe you will grow nicely under my tutelage, he said, and Naruto sat there stunned and shocked, not believing his words. But I am not that special. You were the second Hokage, brother to the first, and trained the third, and I don't have anything that differentiates me from the others. My siblings have their special chakra and everyone loves them too. Why take me on as an apprentice? He asked in disbelief, and Tobirama nodded. Yes, but you do not know your potential the way I see it. Plus, you may be a bit lazy and different than the others, but you have something that no one has as strong as you do, he said, and Naruto looked at him curiously and he continued. You have a pure heart, you do not feel any animosity to your family for not training you, instead you are happy for them and accept it while training yourself. Your drive to become great is there, and you have the guts to face anything thrown at you with a smile until you drop. Those are the traits that make a great shinobi and a great man, he said, and Naruto looked at him stunned as he smiled at the boy and put his hand over his head. So what do you say? Will you be my apprentice? He asked when a tear rolled down Naruto's eye, and he hugged the man tightly, making him smile as he rubbed his back, softly patting his head as Naruto spoke up. This was the first time someone had told him he had potential and accepted him for who he was. But the most important thing was he believed in him and his dream completely and was willing to help him get there. Hi, I will be honored to be your apprentice, old man. I promise I'll make you proud, he said in his chest, and Tobirama smiled and nodded as he broke off the hug and stood up as he took the storage scroll from his hands and unsealed the hip pouch and leg holster and threw it at him as Naruto caught it, and Tobirama stood with his arms crossed and his face now completely stoic. Then what the hell are you wasting time for? Get to training, we are wasting daylight, he said, and Naruto smirked and strapped the equipment on with a nod. Hi old man, let's go, he said, grinning, and Tobirama looked at him with narrowed eyes. You should call me Tobirama-sensei from now on, you brat, he said stoically, and Naruto scoffed and waved his hand lazily, as if, take a hike. You are a long way from getting me to call you anything other than old man. Now let's go and start our training, he said lazily, making Tobirama smirk as he followed the boy to the clearing. Well, it was worth a try, he mused, shaking his head with an amused smile, and started their training on Shurikenjutsu. Naruto walked to the range where the targets were and took out his shurikens, and all the three-pronged kunais he had brought with him, and threw them with a lot of force, and it went off target as a wooden fan made contact with his head with a slap, and he yelped. Hey, what did you do that for? He shouted indignantly, and Tobirama narrowed his eyes at the accusing blonde. You have gone back to throwing that like a hippie, now go again, and if you do not make the technique right there will be a lot of slap marks on your head, he said stoically, and Naruto glared at him as he stared at him blankly, and after a moment grumbled and turned around and threw it, bending his arm and using a bit too much force. Slap, again. came the stoic voice of Tobirama as Naruto rubbed his head and took out another kunai, and this time straightened his arm, and used a bit less force but didn't flick his wrist as he awaited the blow, knowing his mistake. Slap! Rang the voice through the clearing as he glared at Tobirama, who stared at him blankly. Again, he said, and Naruto grumbled but pulled out another kunai and threw it at the target, this time using the correct technique, but saw he had overpowered it, and the aim was way too off. Slap! He glared at the man as he pointed a finger at him accusingly. Hey, I did everything right this time, what did you hit me for? He asked, and Tobirama looked at him blankly, making him feel stupid. You are using way too much strength. What are you, a bear? Throw it with elegance and precision and let the results flow, he said as Naruto puffed his cheeks at the man. You're enjoying this, aren't you? He asked, glaring at him, and Tobirama looked at him stoically. Yes. Now again, he said, and Naruto cursed the man under his breath and pulled out another kunai, and this time did everything almost correctly, but his aim was way too off as he waited for the slap to come, which never came. He turned to him surprised as he got a nod of approval. Yes, this time you did the technique almost right, even though your aim is still way too off, but we'll get it in time. Now take out the shurikens and let's try those, and then you will work on your aim with the both of them. Now get to it, he said stoically, and Naruto scowled and took out some shurikens as he threw them with a straight arm. The same mistake as before. Slap! Again, came the stoic voice of Tobirama, and he sighed, rubbing his head. This was going to be a long day. Clang, 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 slap, clang, 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 slap, slap, clang, 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 were the noises that rang throughout the clearing as Tobirama forced the correct techniques into his head literally each time he made a mistake. As the sun was about to set in an hour, our blonde hero laid sprawled on the ground, and Tobirama stood over him with an amused smile, but Naruto glared at him, too tired to point a finger at him. Kami is watching you. She'll make you pay for being so violent on your humble student. He cursed the man, and Tobirama looked at him amused. Then I guess if you have enough energy to curse me, then we can go few more rounds, he said, and Naruto looked at him with horrified look, making him chuckle at the boy's antics. Alright, let's go inside and get you something to eat and freshen you up before you leave. Now get up and stop whining, he said stoically, walking away, and Naruto followed him, glaring daggers at the man's back, and he showered as Tobirama gave him some food and they ate in comfortable silence. He asked him to seal up his equipment, and Tobirama shook his head, making him confused. You now have access to your chakra. Just pump some chakra into the scroll and they will get sealed, and do the same for unsealing them too, he said, and Naruto nodded as he put the items on the scroll and pumped a hell lot of chakra, ripping the scroll as Tobirama stared at him blankly, and he stared right back. You destroyed the scroll, he said stoically, and Naruto nodded. That I did, he said lazily, and Tobirama nodded as he pulled out another storage scroll and sealed the equipment himself. We will start working on your chakra control along with your Shurikenjutsu from tomorrow. You have a tendency to put everything you have each time you use it, he said, earning a nod from Naruto. Tomorrow, instead of going to the training grounds, come here. We will start working on it from tomorrow onwards. When do you wake up? He asked. I wake up a couple hours before sunrise to read that scroll you gave me, and then get a couple of hours of training before having breakfast, and then come to play with you, he said, and Tobirama nodded, respecting his determination. From tomorrow, wake up at sunrise and read the scroll till breakfast, and then come here. There is no secret training from now on, and we don't need you to burn yourself out, he said, and Naruto nodded as he smiled at his new teacher. He stood up, pocketing the scroll, and walked out as he waved back at him lazily, and Tobirama waved at him back with a smile. Uzumaki Namake's household. Naruto walked in as he saw his family still training and took out some juice and plopped himself on the table as he drank it, sighing in relief. The old man was one hell of a slave driver, he mused as he saw them come in laughing, and Kushina took a seat beside him and saw as Jiraiya told them of the cool hair jutsus that he had created and would teach them one day. He smiled at the excited faces of his siblings and watched them talk and joke as his mind wandered back to the old man. Even if he was strict, the old man was one hell of a teacher, and his improvement told him his ways worked. Even if they hurt like hell, and he could have sworn that he had heard him chuckle once when he wasn't looking. He saw them chatting about the day's training happily, and wondered if he should tell his mother about the training he was doing with the old man. But what if she refused him, and then he wouldn't get to spend time with him? The only one who had showed that he believed in him and had potential like his siblings did. He would keep it a secret for now and tell her about it when she had finished training his siblings and moved on to him. Maybe she would be a bit angry, but he could handle her anger. He saw them laugh and play and moved to his room, telling them good night and kissing Kushina on the cheek as he let the exhaustion of the day take over. Next morning, Naruto woke up with a yawn as the sunlight hit his eyes. After that, he brushed his teeth and down to see Kushina working on the breakfast, and smiled as he walked up to her and tugged on her dress as she looked down with a smile. "Ohio Ka-chan," he said softly, and she smiled and crouched down as she gave him a kiss, and he grinned foxily and sat down, wondering where his siblings were. "Ka-chan, where are Menna and Mito?" he asked, and she giggled. "Oh, those two overdid their training yesterday and are going to sleep in. Jiraiya will come later on, so it's just the two of us for breakfast today," she said, and he smiled and nodded. "So what have you been up to these days, Naruto-chan?" she asked as she sat down, and both dug into breakfast as he answered. "Nothing much, Ka-chan, I just play with a friend of mine," he said, and she smiled at him, looking curiously. He didn't have many friends with his loner personality, that she knew, so she was intrigued. "Who is this new friend of yours, Naruto-chan?" she asked, and he wondered about whether to tell her the truth or not. "Oh, I just met him in the park one day, he's nice. Likes to do things my way," he said, and she smiled at his happy face and nodded as both ate in comfortable silence, and Naruto stood up as Kushina started working on her household chores. "Ka-chan, now I'll go, alright. I'll see you in the evening," he said, and she smiled and nodded, motioning for him to come near and crouch down as she put some money in his pocket with a smile. "Take this new friend of yours to lunch today, my treat, alright?" she said, and he grinned and nodded, kissing her cheek, and ran out as she waved him off happily. He started walking on his way to the Senju compounds as he heard some commotion near the park's secluded area and wondered who it was so early in the morning. He decided to check it out since it was still pretty early anyways. He walked through the bushes and saw 3 boys, probably 10 or so, towering over a girl his age and listened in. "So just because you are a Hyuga you think you are better than us?" one of them said, and the girl shook her head as she responded meekly. "And no," she said softly, and another one of them sneered. "Then what was that cousin of yours said?" he asked, and she looked down, fiddling with her shirt. "I don't think so, I like that," she said meekly, and the third one smirked, gazing at her. "Then apologize. I hate all you freaky-eyed people anyways," he said as he pulled her up by the collar, and her eyes watered as she trembled. "I'm sorry," she said softly, and they laughed at her as he shook her by the collar. "I didn't hear you, now apologize properly or else," he said as her bottom lip quivered, and she whispered another apology as he pulled his fist back to hit her when a heel collided with his face, and he dropped the girl and held his broken nose, crying. Naruto got up and shouldered the second in his stomach, making him bend over in surprise as Naruto landed an uppercut, breaking his nose too, and caught the girl's wrist as he pulled her behind his back and glared at them as the third watched his friends who were on the ground. "Why don't you pick on someone your own size, losers?" he asked, and the boy growled as they heard the voice of some elder coming, and the boy picked up his 2 friends and ran away in fright as Naruto turned around as he saw the girl sobbing with her knees to her chest and crouched down with a lost look. Now how was he supposed to calm her down? He could calm Mito whenever she cried by giving her a hug, and she immediately stopped crying, but he didn't know her, so she might get even more scared if he did that. So he did the only thing that came to his mind. He patted her head softly in a lame attempt to calm her down as she looked at him with teary eyes and sniffed. "Arigato," she said softly, and he grinned foxily and gave her a thumbs up. "It's alright. I got the drop on them, otherwise they would have beaten me to near death," he said lazily, and she looked at him wide-eyed. "Weren't you scared?" she sniffled, and he smiled lazily and waved his hand dismissively, making the girl tilt her head to the side quite cutely in his opinion. "Nah, I would have bailed you out anyways. I'm good at escaping, you know. These idiots aren't as fast as my angry Ka-chan when I prank her," he said, and she giggled softly, making him smile. "So why were they troubling you anyways? I don't think a cute girl like you could do anything to them," he said, and the girl blushed a bit as she heard him call her cute and sniffed as he handed her a handkerchief, and she wiped her tears away. "And no, my cousin told T them something bad, and they were making fun of my eyes too," she said softly, and now he was confused. "Why would they make fun of your eyes?" he asked, and she looked at him curiously. "Everyone made fun of their eyes, saying they were weird, especially her." "Because they are weird," she said softly, and he smiled at her and shook his head. "Nah, they are really pretty. And that lavender tint in your eyes makes it look like pearls that my Ka-chan showed me. I wish I had such pretty eyes," he said in thought, putting his finger to his chin, and imagined himself as a Hyuga. Then thought he would look like a ghost or something with blonde hair, and those eyes contrasting them, and shuddered as the girl giggled, seeing his mortified look. She couldn't understand him at all. One moment he was lazy, extremely brave, smart, and funny, and now a bit stupid as she saw him shake off the vision. He was the first one outside her clan who hadn't called her weird, and on top of that had told her she and her eyes were pretty. Then she remembered she had seen him at the party she went to with her father, where he had told her to befriend his siblings, but she couldn't as everyone pushed her away. And now she was curious about him. "Ayano, what's your name?" she asked softly, and he smiled at the girl and held his hand out for her to shake. Naruto Namikaze. "It's a pleasure to meet you," he said, and she shook his hand softly with a smile. Hinata H. Hyuga," she said, and he smiled and nodded as he wondered what she was doing here of all places in the morning. "Say, Hinata-chan, what are you doing here all by your own in the morning?" he asked, and she smiled and pointed to the flower garden, and he looked at her curiously. "I come here in the morning to collect flowers. I press them and collect them, it's my hobby," she said meekly, and he smiled and nodded. Then he heard a man shout her name as he looked behind her to see a man with those same eyes come and looked at him coldly as he just gave him a lazy smile, and he turned to Hinata. "Hinata-sama, there you are. Are you alright?" he asked, and she nodded with a small smile. "Why yes, Naruto here saved me from bullies. He's really nice," she said softly, and he looked at him stunned. The demon brat had saved her. He looked at him startled and gave a curt nod of thanks as Naruto just cleaned his ear lazily, making him twitch at his laziness. He decided to thank him properly since he had helped the girl he was supposed to watch out for. "Arigato Namikaze-san, your help is much appreciated," he said stoically, and Naruto waved him off lazily. Nah, it was nothing. I'll see you later at Hinata-chan? He asked, and she nodded, twiddling with her fingers. Hi. Arigato. She said softly, and he smiled and nodded as he walked off, and she stared at his walking back with a small smile as she and Ko returned to the Hyuga compounds. Senju clan compounds. Naruto walked up to the door, Tobirama's door, and knocked. A minute later the door was opened by Tobirama, crossing his arms as he looked at him stoically, making him smile lazily at the man. Yo! He said, waving his hand as he stared at him, as he stared right back for a few moments. You're late. He said stoically, and Naruto yawned a bit and rubbed the back of his head lazily, giving him a nod, making him twitch. Why? He asked stoically, and Naruto smiled, thinking of the cute and soft-spoken girl he had met earlier in the morning. Nothing much, just got lost on the path of life. He said lazily with a small yawn, and Tobirama's eye twitched at his stupid and nonchalant excuse that he said with such an expression that it was the truest thing in the world. Seriously, that's the best excuse you could come up with? He asked, and Naruto smiled at the man. Hey, you don't know, but that road is really long and has a lot off, he started explaining, and Tobirama face-palmed and stood aside, motioning for him to come in. In a certain bookstore, a lazy jounin sneezed, then shrugged it off as he picked up the newest edition of Ika Tactics with a perverse giggle. Tobirama smiled a bit as he saw the boy going straight to the clearing and stood in front of him, and nodded. Alright, now let's get started on your chakra control exercises. We'll start with the leaf balancing exercise. You've got to stick a leaf on your forehead with chakra, he said, and Naruto looked at him curiously. Tobirama sat down in a lotus position with him doing the same as he concentrated chakra to his forehead, and it stuck as he motioned for him to do the same. Alright, now focus your chakra on the leaf and try and stick it there. Too much and it blows off, and too little makes it slip, so let's go, he said, and Naruto nodded as he put the leaf to his forehead and focused chakra as it blew off, and his sweat dropped. Looks like he used too much, he mused, and decided to go on again. It went on like that until noon, as he either blew it off or let it slip, and Tobirama stopped him. Alright, that's enough for today, let's continue with your Shurikenjutsu, and then we'll play some shogi to rest and eat, he said, and Naruto nodded as he went on with their training. When they finished their shogi match, Naruto left the compounds with a smile as he walked to his home, Uzumaki Namikaze's household. Naruto walked in and saw his siblings sitting in the lotus position and holding a ram hand seal, and sat down on the porch as watched curiously what they were up to. Come on, Mito, Menma, we have been at it for the past 3 days. With the amount of chakra the two of you have, it shouldn't be a problem to unlock it. Just focus and stay still, Naruto said, making Jiraiya whine, and he stifled a giggle at the looks of disgust from the patience the thing required as Menma and Mito threw annoyed looks at him, and he smiled at him lazily. If you think it's so easy, then why don't you try it, lazy bum? Oh wait, you aren't training yet, said Mito as the frustration got the better of her, and Naruto looked down in sadness at her words and walked away without saying a thing. Realizing what she said, she saddened at her words had said now as Kushina looked at her angrily. Mito, how dare you belittle your brother? You know the only reason he gave up his training was for you, and do you realize how it must have hurt him to hear that? Don't take the frustrations out on someone else, she scolded angrily as Mito looked down. I'm sorry, Kachan, it's just that she was cut off as Kushina spoke up. Go and apologize now, she said sternly, and Mito nodded as she went inside and saw her brother taking out a juice from the fridge as she fiddled with her feet a little and spoke up. Aniki, I'm sorry that she was cut off, as Naruto spoke up. It's alright, Mito, I understand. I didn't mind, you are my little sister after all, he said as he patted her head lazily, and she smiled and hugged him happily, making Naruto hug her back as he watched her walk away and back to her training. Then he noticed Kushina glancing at him worriedly, and gave her a smile and a nod, making her smile back. Those words hurt him, but he knew she was just a bit frustrated and let it slip into the back of his mind as he sat silently watching them train and fail at unlocking their chakra, and came back in as they sat at the table. Kushina, these two have really little patience, and it has been 3 days already, Jiraiya said, and she nodded as Naruto looked at his sad siblings and glared at the pervert. They'll do it. It is just taking them a little time, that's all. You'll see, he said lazily, making his siblings and Kushina look up at him with a smile, and nodded as Menma and Mito spoke in unison. Yet tomorrow we'll do it no matter what happens, both said in unison, and he smiled as Kushina giggled at their claim, and they started talking about some of the day's things and what they needed to improve on as he tuned them out, not understanding anything, and thought back to the soft-spoken girl he saw earlier in the morning. Maybe he'll meet her again someday, he mused with a small smile, and maybe she would be his friend like he always wanted. Kushina saw him spacing out and not really interested in the conversation after a while, and was about to speak up as he stood up and started to leave to his room, putting back his dishes. I'll see you all tomorrow, good night, he said, waving a hand at them from his back, and walked up as Kushina watched him go, sadly that she hadn't even talked to him today, but thought he must be just tired, and continued chatting away, forgetting the small matter. Time skip 1 year. Senju clan compounds. Pant pant, pant pant pant. The sounds of harsh and erratic breathing could be heard all around the training fields in Tobirama's personal training grounds. The man himself stood stoically, watching the kneeling and panting boy in front of him. His gaze was stoic, yet a feeling of pride emanated from him when he gazed at the small drops falling from his shadowed face. "Is that it?" he asked the boy stoically, crossing his arms while the boy caught his breath. "I expected more," he said in a tone of mock taunt and disappointment, making the boy's fiery eyes turn to him in a full-blown glare. He smirked inwardly when he saw those defiant orbs refusing to give in. "Yes, that's it, Naruto. Show me what you have buried deep within you. I know your potential is locked and hidden, show it to me," he thought when he saw the boy get up on shaky legs with his right arm hanging limply to the side. "Damn it, I should have dodged that kick instead of blocking it," he whispered in annoyance, rubbing his sore arm and wiped his face from the dirt over it to look at him angrily. "He isn't even out of breath," he thought angrily, seeing the completely calm and stoic face of his master. Damn, the man pushed hard when he put those old bones to use, he thought. "We are just getting started, old man. I'll show you what I can do," he stated confidently, causing the stoic man's eyebrow to raise up in amusement. "Really?" he asked incredulously, making the boy's eyes to narrow in on him. "We have been at it for 2 hours already. You haven't touched me while I have run you into the ground each time. You can barely stand and your right arm hurts from what I can see," he said while Naruto cursed inwardly at showing his weakness. He was right. Even after the year of brutal training and conditioning, he was being run into the ground while Tobirama didn't even take a breath out of place. A shinobi must know his limits, Naruto, for one must retreat and live to fight another day rather than staying defiant to the end and dying, he said in his wise tone, making Naruto clench his knuckles tightly. "What will you do now, Naruto?" thought Tobirama as he watched his pupil inquisitively. Would he take the smart choice and give in, or? His thoughts trailed off when Naruto shot towards him with a small burst of chakra into his feet, cracking the ground behind him. Tobirama was caught off guard at his ingenious use of chakra to enhance his speed and take him on. A smirk graced his lips when he saw those determined eyes ignoring every pain in his muscles and launch at him with everything he had. "Now it's time to get serious," he thought, for the first time uncrossing his arms and slipping into his defensive Senju-style stance, readying himself for the final spar. Naruto saw it, and knew it would be the last chance he got, since the man was now taking him seriously, and was done fooling around. Tobirama ready to block his punch when he saw his fist tightening, but was shocked when Naruto punched the ground with a burst of chakra and jumped up like a spring trap. He twisted himself with extreme agility in mid-air and launched a roundhouse kick at his head. His heel headed straight for his temple to give him a knockout blow, but Tobirama merely smirked. "Impressive," he mused, bringing his arms up in a traditional cross-arm block, and the heel made contact with it harmlessly. "You've got to do better than Naruto," he trailed off when he saw his smirk and the mischievous glint in his eyes. His eyes widened when he saw his other heel coming through the weakest point in his guard from the side towards his other temple, and caught his previous kick with his left arm and blocked the incoming blow with his right. He smirked when he saw his well-planned attack failing, but had to give the boy credit for it when he saw him falling to the ground. It would have caught any kid his age or even a few years older completely off guard, but he had the battle-hardened instincts of nearly 5 decades in combat. There was no way. His thoughts trailed off when he saw Naruto landing both his palms on the ground and springed himself back to Tobirama's face. His both feet soles coming for Tobirama's chin, and he barely leaned back to see them breeze past his face unharmed due to his instincts, and kicked the boy in his chest, launching back while skidding back himself. He was surprised when he realized that the first attack along with the second one were merely distractions. The third was the main attack, and he had nearly gotten him due to him taking the boy lightly. But how did the boy have the instincts to pull off an instantaneous attack like that, all the while calculating his each and every move in mid-air? That was hard even for seasoned chunits. His thoughts trailed off when he saw a wobbly Naruto standing up and looking at him with a smirk. But what shocked him to his core were his eyes. They weren't the usual cerulean blue pools. Each eye held a single toma with the scarlet red accentuating them now. "Sharingan," he whispered in amazement as he was in the rarest moment at a loss for words. The boy had done a feat that not even pure Uchihas were capable of. He had beaten the record of the previous Uchiha prodigy by 2 years. And he wasn't even in the academy for now. So that was how he was able to pull that combo off. "I've got you this time, old man," he heard the voice of the blonde breaking him out of his stupor. He was confused but grazed the back of his hand on his lip to see it bleeding slightly. His last attack had grazed him? He watched Naruto giggling and pointing at him happily, completely unaware of his eyes, and Tobirama couldn't help but let out a wholehearted chuckle himself. Both laughed hilariously at the moment, both wondering why they were laughing but just couldn't find the reason. It just felt right. He saw Naruto flail left and right slightly when his eyes became half-lidded and rolled to the back of his head. Tobirama was in front of him in a blur when he started falling face first to the ground and picked the boy up in his arms. "I've got you, old man. You've got to pay for my deluxe bowl now," he whispered in his half-conscious state before falling unconscious, and Tobirama couldn't help but chuckle and shake his head. The boy just never ceased to amaze him. His eyes darted onto a small patch of bushes between the large trees that were his closest link to his now-deceased elder brother. "You can come out now, you know?" He spoke in amusement when he heard a small and soft eep as he watched a small 6-year-old girl come out of the bushes. He looked at the little girl curiously, already having figured it was a small child from his senses, and the way she was hiding herself in the bushes so close to them. No one was stupid enough to spy on him like that, and that too in his own house. He saw the girl with her neck-length time-cut indigo hair. His eyes looked at her own and he was surprised to see the pupilless eyes of the signature Kekki Genkai of the Hyuga clan. A Hyuga? And her forehead is clean too, that means she is of the main branch. And if my guess is right, she is the heiress to the clan no less. He thought when he saw the girl stand in front of him, finding the plain grass quite interesting to stare at while fiddling with her elegant white kimono's silk. He was quite curious as to the girl's behavior. It was quite un-Hyuga-like. The Hyuga clan always prided themselves as one of the noble clans of the village, and would never look down or not meet someone's eyes. Their pride instilled from childhood by their clan would not allow them to do so, especially the main branch. He mused when he saw the shy girl. He smiled at the girl and crouched down to her eye level, putting his hand on her head to make her wide eyes stare at him in surprise and nervousness when he heard her speak. Ayano, I didn't mean to spy. I just wanted to meet Naruto-kun, but she stuttered out with a small pink dust ever present on her cheeks, making him quite surprised. First of all, from her timid and shy personality, the exact opposite of the Hyugas, to her calling Naruto so affectionately. He didn't know his pupil had any friends his age, much less had caught the eye of the heiress to the Hyuga clan. You know Naruto? He asked curiously, rubbing her head to calm down her nervousness, and she smiled a small smile, giving a small meek nod. Hi, he saved me from bullies in the par. He's really nice, she spoke softly, making him quite surprised yet proud. He saw her looking at Naruto worriedly while poking her fingers in a cute nervous tick, making his smile widen at the concern her soft eyes held in them. He's alright, a shower, some food and a nap will make him bounce up like a spring again, he said, surprising her that he had read her question, and she nodded with a smile. What's your name, girl? He asked in curiosity, making her eyes tear away from the unconscious boy and look at him in a small respectful gaze while bowing politely. Hinata Hyuga, she said politely, making him smile and nod. So he was right, she was the heiress, but what made him happy was that she looked at the boy for who he was instead of the elder's discrimination. Tobirama Senju, he introduced himself, and she smiled and nodded at his introduction. He rose an eyebrow when she fiddled with the sleeve of her kimono and took out a small bottle of some kind of balm and held it out to him. He looked at her questionably while taking it. It's a healing ointment my Ka-chan used to make. Please give it to Naruto-kun, she said softly, making him smile and nod at the cute girl. He was glad there was someone his age who looked at the boy with such concern. The next generation was growing up nicely, he thought, but asked a question that had been bothering him. Why are you here all alone, Hinata? He asked, and she looked down while poking her fingers like earlier shyly. Well, Ko doesn't want me to meet Naruto-kun, so she trailed off, making Tobirama smile in amusement. Gave him a slip? He asked amusedly, getting a small nod from the girl and